Okay. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for attending. My name is Councillor Sean Keating. I'm currently taking the chair tonight in the absence of Councillor Keith Watts. Councillor Keith Watts is not well and has indicated that he didn't feel able to take tonight's meeting due to the timing and, of course, the distance. So, as the Vice Chair, I'm taking the chair. We do have a position in the Scrutiny Committee and within the Constitution for the Vice Chair. Whoever is conducting the meeting should have the Chair should have a Vice Chair who's from the opposition. And therefore we don't have any current additional Vice Chair from the opposition. So can I invite people from the floor to nominate a Vice Chair for tonight's meeting only from the opposition? Excuse me, Councillor. You please. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Can we have nominations for a Vice Chair from the opposition to be Vice Chair? Councillor Goddison.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to nominate Councillor Leeds. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Please, if it's a nomination, fine. If it's not,
Councillor James.
Excuse me, James, Councillor James. Excuse me. I'll run the meeting. Thank you very much. Excuse me, Councillor James. You have been nominated. Are you prepared to accept? The answer is yes or no. Not that difficult. Thank you.
Point of order, I was named.
Okay, now that you've refused, you may nominate someone if you wish.
I'll nominate Councillor Mike Bound.
Councillor Mike Downs. If you're successful, are you prepared to accept? Thank you very much. You stay where you are for a moment. Mike Downs, okay. If we do it orderly, we'll get through it. Are there any other nominations? Okay, I still need a seconder now for Councillor Mike Downs. We've got a seconder. Thank you very much. Councillor Downs, would you like to join me? Okay, before we get to the substantive matter, can I just ensure that you all are aware and familiar with the fact that the two special briefing notes, one in relation to the options for the relocation of the town football club, and the other one, which is a two-page document called The Implications for the Many-Done Decision on the Council's role as owner and planning. Both of those were until this morning in pink documents, and they have both been converted to white documents, which simply means, for those of you who are not familiar, it simply means that because they're on white paper, they may be referred to and discussed in public in the body of the meeting. Does that cause anyone an issue? If not, okay. The next item of routine business, which has to be done, is fire evacuation procedures. If there's a fire, get out. There. Okay, thank you. If we have to, if we want to, or if you decide to, discuss confidential papers, that's the papers that are left in pink. That can only be done by members agreeing that the meeting is now becoming confidential, and I have a spiel to read out if we get there. Thirdly, I wanted to say we do apologies and replacements and matters of that now, and then I'll give some more little statements before we start the body of the meeting. Okay. Can we have those who were not at the first part of this meeting, which was a week ago, or about a week ago? Councillor Bound, and you're replacing Councillor Keith Watts. Yeah. Okay, welcome, thank you, Keith. Next, Councillor Miller. And you're...
After the council meeting last week, Chair, I'm now a permanent member of this committee.
Yeah. Thank you. Now permanent, yeah. Next. Anyone else? Were you here the last time?
I was here last time, but I am now a permanent member, but I was here last time.
Okay, thank you. Cognizant. And Councillor Still?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I am a permanent member on this committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor James?
Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, the decision that we're reviewing tonight is a 2014 decision, but it's inextricably linked to the 2012 decision made by Cabinet. And I believe Councillor Still was a member of the Cabinet. I just seek clarification. It's not something I'm particularly precious about, but I think in terms of Councillor Still being able to explain how it's okay that she can sit and scrutinise effectively a decision that she partly took.
I will invite Councillor Still to make a contribution. Thank you.
I have sought advice, and I am quite in my rights to be here tonight. However, when the decision was made, you're absolutely right, in 2012, I was a member of the Cabinet. It wasn't in my portfolio, but I was a member of the Cabinet. But apparently I can be here tonight.
I have no other advice to any other effect. Thank you. Can I start by saying, at the end of last meeting, the representatives of the town football club complained to officers, certainly not to me, but they didn't know I was going to be chair. They complained that they felt that they had been disrespected at the last meeting, and some of the issues that they raised were people asking questions and matters of that nature. I don't believe that itself would or should cause anybody difficulty, but I do want to say publicly on behalf of the council, as the chair of Scrutiny tonight, that we had no intention to disrespect the football club, and we're sorry if they felt that way. That's it. I don't want a discussion on it. Thank you. Now, the next item of business, as far as I'm concerned, is to discuss with you, and I do mean discuss with you, how I want to run tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is the continuation of last week's meeting. It's not a new meeting, and we're not redoing all the stuff that we did last week. Is it only last week? Oh, it feels like a month. Yeah. Now, we have taken steps to give the people who signed the call-in papers a separate seating area so that they're no longer behind anybody, so they can be seen to be participants when they're allowed to. And so my intention is to run this meeting subject to your approval as committee members, so the call-in people don't get a say about how we run the meeting. First of all, to invite those people who were categorized last week as the experts that contributed to the number of decisions. For example, the officers that dealt with the selection of the sites, the officers that dealt with the ownership, property, values and issues of the sites, and the legal character who produced and did most of the documentation in legal terms for last week's and tonight's meeting. So that's what I intend to do. Invite the call-in signatories who are not members of the committee to first question them individually as we go through them, and then the members of the committee to ask questions of the same officers, and they're not going back and forward, they'll only come up once. And at the end of that process, before the committee goes into a general debate about where we're going to go with this, I'm going to ask the call-in signatories who are not members of this committee to invite them to make a last contribution just to make sure their concerns are addressed. I'm not saying they'll agree with what we're talking about, but they will have a last opportunity to express their concerns. Can I invite you to agree with that approach? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make it clear, that sounds awful like an inquiry. That if you're going to ask the officers who dealt with the selection of, or the site selection of, or the options of the sites 2 years ago, and you're going to get councillors to, dare I use the word, cross-examine? I didn't think that was the purpose of the call-in. That's an inquiry that should be conducted elsewhere. The purposes of the committee, I understood, and we were offered the draft committee comments and concerns that came from the first portion of this particular committee, was to get the cabinet probably to re-examine certain aspects of this whole issue before any decision is made. Or have I got that wrong? But I don't think we're here to conduct an inquiry. Scrutiny, yes, I agree. But a scrutiny of a decision, not the scrutiny of all the detail that led to that decision. Could you take, I'm asking some advice here, but that's what I got it from what you just said.
Well, that certainly wasn't what I meant to say, but a scrutiny is a mechanism to inquire into. That's what scrutiny is. So it's not the formal inquiry that you might be assuming. But I'll wait for other members to contribute first before I go any further. Councillor Potter.
I mean, on that point, Chairman, if I may, it seems to me our invitation to the experts was no more than them being able to help us, to assist us in coming to the conclusions that we hope to come to. Specialist advice in regard to how original decisions may have been reached by the Cabinet in the first place. No more complicated than that, to be frank. The other point I just wanted to raise while I'm speaking, if I may, it's a matter around the pink papers. I think stating the obvious for all of us, I think if we are forced into private session, we will lose the public. The public will go, and I can't imagine them sitting around somewhere and waiting for us to come back into a public session. I'm fascinated, obviously, the way we can convert some of the pink papers into white papers for this evening's meeting, and I'm pleased about that. The other question I have, and I raised it in an email today, I don't really have an answer this evening or anybody else, but I have never quite understood how papers become pink papers. Who determines that they are confidential, and what criteria are used to make that assessment? It's beyond me, quite frankly. Who as an individual does that, or is it, I don't know how that can be predetermined, to be frank, but we are then forced into this, difficulty and embargo on papers that I say subjectively shouldn't be in pink anyway, but, I don't want to be inhibited by this, and I just wonder how we ever get into that situation.
You responded to two issues there, Councillor Potter. One was how are we going to run the meeting, and then you raised the issue for pink paper. But I'm just going to finish the first bit first, if you don't mind. So, does anyone else want to contribute about how I intend to run the meeting? Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification. In discussing the legal issues, are you proposing that we discuss the detail of the agreement that's between Basingstoke Town and Basingstoke Dean Council?
The very simple answer to your question is, you can decide, all right? So if anybody here is a member of the committee who wants to discuss them, and they're in pink papers, they can discuss them. That's the whole purpose of having them. But if we have to discuss the pink papers, we have to go into a private session. That's the only issue. Yeah. Can we come back to how we're going to run meeting? Does anybody object violently to the way I propose we run the meeting? Councillor James, you object violently?
Never. I totally accept the way you're running the meeting, but I just think to back at Councillor Tate's point, there'd be an advantage if you could advise perhaps committee members to stick to the white papers for as long as possible, so that all the pink paper questions were left at the end, rather than midway through the meeting going off in a breaking of the meeting.
Very good point. Hold on, I'll get expert advice as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Miller, Councillor Miller, you're the only one that could be categorised as perhaps objecting. Can I, first of all, just let you know that we did agree effectively at the last meeting that we would invite the officers to come and answer questions. So I think it really is appropriate that we do that bit. I'll need to finish what I'm saying. So on that basis, would you have any objection to us going along in the way we're talking?
To answer questions, absolutely, Chair. That's not a problem. But to delve into how decisions were made in the papers that eventually arrived at a draft decision notice by the Cabinet, I think is going too far back and too far deep. But if there are high-level issues that want to be discussed, fine. But I would, and there's one paper that went white on us, was the briefing note, I think, the SPG. I had to ask what the SPG was because it was before my time as a councillor 5 years ago. I understood it was a planning group, an internal planning group of the council between officers. So obviously I hadn't seen it before, but if we're going to go through, have questions, if you look at that paper and go through every one of those and questions, we're going to be here all night. And that's what I have a bit of reluctance to. High-level questions, fine. But the detail of how the Cabinet eventually got to that decision in 2012, I think probably is going over the top. That's my comment to the committee.
Well, unfortunately, unlike yourself, I don't know who's going to ask what. So I have to live with how it comes out at the time. So I'm going to operate on the basis that we've said, with one clarification. I should have phrased my last statement about the call-in people having an opportunity to make a last statement rather than ask a last question. Okay? So we're going to start now with me letting you know that I didn't know that the papers were going pink any better than you did. I didn't know this morning that they were going pink. I'm sorry, going from pink to white. And I object as an elected councillor, and in this case a chair, to officers doing things without even letting us know. And I mean, if for 3 weeks we have pink papers, and there's good reason for them to be pink, and then they turn white overnight, there is something that needs to be corrected there. That's all I'd say. And that's all I can say in relation to your point as well, Councillor Potter, at this moment. Okay, Councillor Cubitt now.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say, if we go back to the central tenet of this meeting, we're going to listen to the call-in bits that are addressed. But for me, the most important thing is that we now have available to us the legal documentation, and I have read them, and I have had discussions with the legal department, and I think it is extremely good news that the portfolio holder undertook last week not to sign these agreements prior to public consultation, and I have big concerns about the fact that for a tenor of 150-year lease, that documents like this have not been drafted by external lawyers. And I said that in my former life, I used to deal with legal documentation every day of the week for big deals, never out to 150 years. And we had some of the top corporate finance lawyers in-house, and we never had them draft a document like this. We always employed the services of a specialist team for whatever the project was. So my comment, having gone through the documentation, and I've already raised this with the legal department. Well, I know, because I don't think there's any point in all of us talking till 1 o'clock in the morning if everyone's in agreement with what I'm about to propose, which is that if the portfolio holder was minded to have these documents overseen by an expert lawyer who specialises in extremely long tenors, because I have to say I've never signed an agreement for 150 years. And we owe that to the taxpayers of this town. We owe it to our residents. And if the portfolio holder was minded to instruct a lawyer that was to bring together these 4 documents and oversee them to see the contractual relationships and the links, because I have some very grave concerns that not all the T's have been crossed and all the I's dotted. If he was minded to do that, then I think there's not much point in us as a group spending an inordinate amount of time discussing what we believe, when none of us are legal experts, some of the potential pitfalls that there are in these documents that I have already, I believe, recognised and identified. Thank you.
Now, I'm not going to ask you all to put you forward your immediate issue and then ask the cabinet member again, because we have a process you have just agreed with me we're going to adopt. But on this one occasion, I will make an exception, because you now know it is an exception, and ask Councillor Isaac to respond. Thank you.
Good evening, committee and Mr. Chairman. In response to the point you make, Councillor Cubitt, I think first of all I'd just make the point that actually we have got many long leases in the borough. A lot of our holdings are held on very long leases, so it's not that unusual. But I do agree with you that that's not the complicated bit particularly. It's about the development agreement, and we have got very good officers in the legal team, and I'm clear about that. But we have, through this process, actually involved Eversheds, who are one of the leading London firms, to check various parts of it. But I accept the point you're making, and in the time that we have ahead of us, if this does go forward and to public consultation, then I agree with you. It would make sense to give all the documents a thorough review. So I'm quite happy to external firm, yes, and one of the specialists in this sort of field. So I've got no problem with that, because I take on board the point you're making, and that's, that we are as an administration here to embrace the new constitution. We're part of it, and we are here to support the constructive scrutiny of decisions that are called in.
Thank you for that. Chair, just one last thing on the exception is that it's just that the law firm that drafted the document that there's 2 documents I have concerns with in particular, and I can't go into any more information, but that they're pink. But the the lawyer that drafted them is in fact, and we're allowed to mention Basron because they were mentioned last time, is Basron's lawyer. So, because normally as a banker, if it was our land, I would instruct the law firm, and then the person who was buying the land or leasing the land would have their lawyers negotiate with my lawyers. And what we seem to have done, and I'm not criticising the lawyers here, but I'm just saying it just seems to be upside down, is we've accepted, well, I'm sure we've negotiated, but the lawyer is not our lawyer, and yet it is our land. So that's the only final comment I want to make on it. It just seems to be inverted logic.
Can I ask the cabinet member to take account of that and go away and sort it out?
Yes.
Thank you. Already got a substantial way through the meeting, and I've got notes of the points that we made. We finalised the meeting to come back today in order that we could continue. And the continuation starts with us inviting they're called experts, to give you an opportunity as the call-in people and as members of the committee to ask them questions. Okay? That okay with yourselves? Right. The first one we're going to call is God, I'm sorry. It's definitely the beginning of Alzheimer's. Sorry, I'm not debating how to do it now. Yes, come in. No, you sit there, but you can make a contribution from the table. Do you want to sit at the... No. No, it's okay. Yeah, I've answered Councillor James. Oh my God, Beerman, yes. Jeez, I really can't. Go on, okay, come up.
Chair, there's been all this discussion about the legal agreements. I just want to say my purpose as being part of a signatory had nothing to do with the delicacy of the legal agreements, because I hadn't seen any legal agreements at that stage, so I didn't know whether they're good, bad or indifferent. And I don't really think that I'm in a position to debate any legal agreements, not least because I only got the papers last night, which means that I haven't done a thorough job of reading them anyway. But we were disprivileged as signatories and not members of the committee. To me, the issue is the site the right site, and was the selection procedure right? And any time spent on legal agreements seems almost a waste of time to me, because it might not be on that site, so we might want a completely different agreement. So I don't see the point in spending hours looking at the agreement. My submission is I want to have a review of the various sites, and if that's agreed, I'm a happy bunny. I'll go home smiling. Thank you, Chair.
And if you stop talking, we'll do that. Okay, right. We'll start with Tim Bosky. Tim Bosky is our head of a range of issues, and he was involved in the discussions with the football people about the various sites. Okay. Now you've got the paperwork that Tim produced. Does anybody want to ask any questions from the call-in signatories? Wait a minute. Go on. No, that's the end.
But at no point are you able to come with a question.
No, I'm staying with what I decided now, right? But you make a note if you need the advice. Now, we've got four experts, okay? We've got members of the committee, we have yourselves. The meeting needs to be constructive, and please don't repeat each other's questions. It would be really helpful if that wasn't happening. Can I, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I really do perhaps feel like going off.
I can't allow the proceedings this evening to go ahead without personally stating my total dissatisfaction. This is no criticism to you, forced in this role as chair this evening, but it's to do with the fact that right up until certainly midday today, I have been requesting to understand the protocol of this committee as far as the call-in signatories are concerned. I've been asking to be advised whether we were going to have the opportunity to participate. From the senior executive officer, Laura Taylor, I received quite considerable detail as to why I wouldn't be able to, and clarification on that particular point. To find now this evening, having received some very relevant documentation only around about 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'm now being asked to operate in a fashion, not to repeat possibly some of the questions my colleagues may make, and to be able to be asking some salient points of officers. Chair, one word I'd ask for from you is indulgence.
Can I just make sure people understand? When we created the new constitution, we didn't finalize the arrangements properly in relation to calling. So we're left with an unsatisfactory arrangement, which we will have to revisit. Up until this morning, I was being told by the chairman that you couldn't contribute any more. You've been. The reality is, I'm trying to be flexible so that we can get through tonight and get a rational and reasonable decision without being here till midnight. Because I have no wish to be here till midnight. So all I'm asking is, if I'm indulging the calling people already by effectively bending the rules with your prior approval. I asked your prior approval so that so you need to understand that. I have no wish to cut you off or to limit you what you're saying, but I'm asking you to limit yourselves to enable us to get through this. That's all. Thank you. So whoever wants to start now, please. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I would ask, obviously, for the relevant officer to volunteer to answer my question, because I'm not particularly sure who it's aimed at. I would like to have some view expressed from the officer team as to what particularly caused them to reject the Leisure Park site, and in the period of consideration, why was the Hampshire Football Club, who managed for this local authority the Winkleberry football facility, not approached with regard to seeing whether there was possibility of joint venture working?
Thank you, Councillor Parker. That's all within the remit that Mr. Timbowski can answer to the best of his ability, and we'll ask him now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to begin just very quickly to perhaps to clarify for members that there was a query about what SPG was. It's actually the Strategic Property Group. It no longer exists within the Officer Working Arrangements, but it did at the time of these reports. On that group was myself, the head of property, head of planning, head of finance, and 2 corporate directors. There may have been others on there, and it was my role to take the work of the project team, which I didn't lead, in fact, that was led by a member of my staff, and to present the outcomes of that project team work to the Strategic Property Group for their perspective. So I just wanted you to understand that. There's mention being made about a member wanting your indulgence. Well, the only indulgence I would request from members is the fact, a recognition that these reports were produced 5 years ago, and whilst I'm happy to try and answer any queries, any detailed queries on the work of the group itself, I'll not be able to answer, as I myself wasn't on that officer group. I was responsible for reporting the work of that group to a more senior level, and then discussing that with the leader, the deputy leader, and the chief executive as well. So I just thought it'd be helpful to understand my the overall perspective that I'm able to comment. Okay. Right, now the questions were, one was about Hans FA. I think we may have briefed Hans FA at some point. We haven't approached them for working in a partnership manner, that's true. We did though look at Winklebury as a potential site allied to the leisure park, as I don't think it was possible to locate both the training pitch and a stadium on the leisure park side. And sorry, Councillor Parker, your first question was?
The question was about the leisure park. Why was it disregarded?
What particularly were the issues that caused the officers to reject the leisure park?
Yeah.
And if I may, Chair, you're on. You like? I fully understand, like I hope the committee members present here, the reasoning with regard to separately looking at Winklebury site. My question was in relation to the possibilities of choosing the leisure park site for the relocation of the football club. Was there no communication, discussion or meeting with our existing partners delivering services in that area for this council?
I think the report that I prepared back in March 2012 made it clear that the Hilton Hotel site, the site to the rear of the Hilton Hotel, was the football club's favoured site, and that report lists the various aspects that and the reasons why that was the case. I think officers recognised that there were pros and cons with both sites. Some of the problems with the leisure park, I think, were the potential impact on existing tenants, that the football club wouldn't be the regional draw that the emerging regeneration strategy for the leisure park is envisaging. There's a relatively restricted area within the vacant sites, and that would have entailed the training pitch likely to be off the site. But it does. We do accept that it had good parking and good road communications. So we, in looking at both sites, and you'll see that from the October 2009 report to SPG, there were pros and cons with both of those sites. But ultimately, it was the site that the football club wished to pursue that was taken forward in the March 2012 decision.
Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Tim. You've mentioned several times in your answer that the site behind the Hilton Hotel was the favoured site of Basingstoke Football Club. And you raised the issues with regard to difficulties in respect of different tenures on the leisure park site. Would I be correct, and could I take you back to the meeting that I had with you with Councillor Gavin James when we were first made aware of the proposals, that it was quite clearly stated to us that the site behind the Hilton Hotel was the least favoured site of this council.
I think both sites have pros and cons attached to them. The assessment approach, during that assessment approach, officers' views are obtained on both of those sites, and we recognise that they have both sites have significant issues associated with them. And some of those significant issues on the Hilton site are referred to in the March 2012 officer report, where we talk about the loss of open space, about the potential parking issues as well, and a range of other issues that we felt would need to be satisfactorily addressed as part of the planning process. So I think it's true to say that the sites are, certainly in my mind, fairly well balanced, but ultimately the only sensible approach was to pursue the site that the football club themselves felt that fitted their requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Parker?
Yes, I'm sorry, Chair, and I'm not looking particularly to identify any fault, but I would like just to have it confirmed that the words that were spoken to me on that occasion was that the site behind the Hilton Hotel was this council's least favoured site. At the meeting between Mr. Tim Bosky and the Chief Executive, Mr. Tony Curtis.
No, you can ask the questions. He'll have to decide how to answer. I'm sorry. Could you like to continue, Doctor? Sorry for interrupting you.
I haven't got a note of that meeting, and I can't recall exactly what was said. If that's your recollection at that time, then that must have been the case. Can you remind me when that meeting was?
I actually believe, I can't give you the date, but you may have that calendar note. It was, I believe, 48 hours before the process went public. And as a ward member, myself and Councillor Gavin James, who was also present at that meeting, and it was something that at that meeting that I took particular care of drilling down on. The date, I would suggest you know better than me. I can't offer you a date, but it was very early in the process. It was the first opportunity that I, as a ward councillor, was made aware of those proposals.
All I can say, Councillor Parker, as an honourable guy, there's no reason for any of us to doubt your recollection. Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you. Tim, can I just pick up on the point you said, regeneration of the leisure park, that it didn't link with the regeneration of the leisure park. Can you just clarify what you meant by that?
I'm certainly happy to give you my perspective on the leisure park regeneration strategy, although Nick Collins, one of my colleagues, might be able to provide more detail. But my understanding is we're looking for a regional draw on the leisure park, and are looking to work with a strategic development partner in achieving that. The football club was not seen to be a comfortable fit with that sort of overall regeneration approach.
Can I just push a bit further? But who said it wasn't a good fit? You know, who decided that?
That would have been in consultation with property services.
Was that also in as part of a political decision-making process as well, or was that just officers making that decision?
Well, the decision that was made was the decision in March 2012. There was no decision prior to that. Certainly we would have shared emerging thoughts on the relative merits of the leisure park and the hotel site to the rear of the hotel with the leader and deputy leader as those thoughts emerged.
Okay, I'm just pushing you again, but what I meant is, did you have the discussions with the cabinet member with responsibility for the leisure park regarding the football stadium not being a suitable site?
Yes, we'd have had this discussions with the relevant members. Absolutely.
Can I also then just go back to open space? Can I ask you, in the 2009 report, it talks about that there would be required to establish significant harm to open space landscape. Where can you demonstrate in making the decision to proceed now with the legal or to proceed that harm has been established or overcome?
Sorry, Councillor James, can you refer me to which report and paragraph you're referring to? I'm not clear whether you're the July or the October report.
In the July report.
And can you refer me to where? So I'm not trying to be difficult, but I just want to understand your question.
What I'm wanting to know is, throughout the matrix, it talks about significant harm that will be demonstrated to the site. Can you give me the information as to where that has been tested against our open space, our biodiversity and our landscape policies? So when we looked at, and in both reports, but in the documents that you've got that are not in confidential, it says that there will be significant harm, and it's a tick. Can you tell me where that's been tested, and what do you mean by significant harm?
I'm sorry, I can't see the reference to significant harm that you're referring to, but I can understand the issue behind the question is to what extent have we assessed the degree of harm caused to open space, residential amenity, a whole range of different factors. I think in the October report it does look in a little bit more detail about those issues. But as the March 2012 report was at pains to point out, that the decision that we successfully sought in March 2012 was a decision as landowner and did not in any way reflect the planning merits of the site. And it was anticipated that a whole raft of detailed issues would be looked at, whether it was biodiversity, whether it was landscape, whether it was car parking, whether it was loss of open space. And some of those issues were referred to in the report as being significant and that would require, the local planning authority would require satisfying prior to considering the planning application.
Can I ask, in relation to the report also refers to this as loss of accessible natural green space, and lots of the residents at the last meeting also raised their concerns about it being a natural piece of open space. Can you give me examples within the urban area where we have natural green space?
In general, I mean, I think perhaps a useful area to pick up might be the Tavern and Fremantle regeneration project, where the officer team had similar considerations that informed the council's landowning interests, and as a landowner prior to planning permission on that site, there was a view that we would reach a deal with the relevant housing association. So I see this as a sort of a similar issue in a way.
I think that wasn't what I meant. What I was saying is, this is an area of natural green space. Are there, in the urban area, other examples of natural green space? I remember seeing a report by the open space officer that talked about where those pieces of natural green space are. Can you tell me where we have those within the town centre or in the urban area?
Well, the green infrastructure strategy points out the distribution of accessible natural green space. An example might be Crabtree Plantation, for instance. The green infrastructure strategy, I know, is referred to in some of the information that the committee was looking for or sought some advice on. And I think it's worth mentioning that with regards to the green infrastructure strategy, that's primarily about how we manage our land and how we improve connectivity, hopefully, between the various existing areas of green space. It's not in itself a planning control tool, which is often assumed to be erroneously.
Martin, I know you have to go, so...
Yeah, that's very kind. I hope to be snappy as promised previously. Two things. One was, I don't believe Councillor Parker's question about the Hants FA was completely answered. It was answered in terms of there having been discussions. I'm not sure I heard an explanation of the Hants FA's views rather than there being discussions, and whether they just said, well, we're not interested, go and talk to somebody else. That was just one. The other was just to query, assuming, as I believe should be the case, one said, very sorry football club, we do understand you're going to be very, very, very disappointed if this doesn't go ahead now in the form that you have expressed a preference for, but we have to look at the wider issues, i.e. what's right for Basingstoke and Dean at large and not just the preferences of the football club, and we therefore reanalyse the sites. Of course, in the meantime, a couple of them are really off the agenda, but there are others that might still be relevant and haven't had full council. When I say full council, I don't mean full council meeting, but full council membership, debate and participation, whether one cannot go back a couple of steps, take that action, and then come back with something that there was a general will behind from members and the public at large. As I appreciate that will leave some people massively disappointed in the meantime, but is there a reason why that process, apart from delay, shouldn't proceed?
The process to get to where we are has clearly taken a long time. We refer to the 2009 initial site assessments. Whilst, of course, it's always open to the council to review its current approach, we need to obviously seek the views of the football club to know whether, in the context that you suggest, whether they, quite frankly, still be interested in working with the council to look at alternative sites, bearing in mind the length of time that might take.
I mean, of course, if they are sufficiently interested, as I say, clearly they'd be disappointed, but it is, that's got to be their choice. But if it remains that they do want to do something, and I'm disappointed at the comments earlier that they felt they were not warmly received, because I felt they did, those members who spoke at the last meeting did well, spoke very well and very sympathetically. And, you know, I can't see that there is any rift in terms of overall intent. The question is just the detail. It's an important detail, i.e. where does the club go, and also what's the consequence of vacating the site that they have now, which there needs to be further work on. But beyond that, with goodwill and hopefully good wind behind it, it shouldn't take forever to look at something else, not least because there's already been suggested we might have to review the legal agreements anyway, which would in itself create a delay. So it seems to me that with goodwill all round, one could say, let's look at this list again, see if there's anything new that's popped up that we weren't thinking of at the time. Perhaps Many Down is now more viable, who knows, and then take that forward.
Sorry, before you come in, Tim, could I just say, we can only speculate about what the football club might do should the decision not be favourable to them, and I don't believe Tim is any more able to speculate than we are, if you don't mind my saying so. If he doesn't know the answer to the question, he still won't know the answer to the question the next time he answers. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much. I fully understand that. The bit that I'm asking is about our position and our ability to do it. What the football, I mean, obviously the first thing would be to say, we're thinking of doing this, how do you feel, folks? But then that we should be able to do it is my question. I'll leave it rest at that, but I hope my thinking is clear from that. I didn't get an answer on the Hants FA though.
I don't think we're involved in discussions with the Hants FA in terms of a partnership approach, if that's what you're asking. That didn't happen.
Thank you, Chairman and colleagues.
I'm sorry, I was trying to finish with the people who were not on the committee first. Do you have another question now? Yeah, I'll come back to the members on the committee pretty soon. Off you go, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. It is on the same subject. I'd just like to ask the officer if he could, first of all, clarify for me, in the report dated, well, I don't see a date on it. It's the briefing to the SPG, which is the site appraisal. It has Appendix 2, which is the detailed site appraisal. And I'd like, first of all, to clarify if on page 10, whether the site appraisal rear of Hilton Hotel, Plan 8A, is that the proposed site? First, can I ask that?
Yes, that's right.
Chair, if I may just then ask the officer to refer to that. On the score, that site receives just 4 no harmful impact ticks. And then if I could now refer the officer to the same schedule with regard to the leisure park sites, and just asked for confirmation that both the leisure park sites receive more favourable score than the site now being proposed, according to those analysis done in 2009.
Yes, that seems to be the case.
Councillor Mark Taylor, did you want to contribute it, or did you want to just be there?
My main question, and the only question, was the site that was picked. Did the other sites, was they greenbelt space as well? Because it doesn't make sense that they're moving to use greenbelt space. Once it's used, once it's gone, it's gone. It doesn't make sense, and the majority of people in Basingstoke don't want to lose any more green space. It's not ours to keep, we're just borrowing it. So we need to look at, if we're going to use this, is it the only alternative? Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
In answer to the point, is it the only alternative? It was the alternative preferred in the Cabinet decision in March 2012, but it's clearly not the only one, as through our options analysis, we'd sieved down from approximately 16 sites to potentially 4 that were worthy of further investigation. And at the risk of repeating myself, ultimately, the site had to be identified that was agreeable to the football club. it doesn't matter, we could have identified any site we'd liked. If the football club wasn't interested in it, then there was little point going through the exercise. We felt that whilst there were some significant issues associated with the Hilton Hotel, acknowledged in the reports, that from the landowning perspective, there appeared to be enough community benefit and looking at the financial deal and all the rest of it, to make it worthwhile taking this forward through to the planning process so that a whole range of issues could be explored in detail.
I'm sorry, have you finished, Mark? Thank you very much, Councillor James.
Just another one on open space. So I'm referring to the report of October 27th, page 6. Tim, the rear of the Hilton Hotel Stadium, which is the proposed site, is Plan 8A. In that report, when it comments on issues which give rise to some harm, which would require additional investigation, it states in there that there would be some impact on the landscape value of the site. There would be the loss of kickabout open space for the residents, Riverdene residents, which could not be replaced. Have you mitigated for that in taking this decision forward?
The mitigation for the loss of kickabout space is the multi-use games area that will be funded by the football club and provided by the council.
And the loss of the impact on the landscape value of the site, how have you mitigated for that?
The mitigation measures are firstly the positioning of the proposed stadium at the lower part of the slope of Old Common Road, rather than on the upper part of the site closer to the residential properties. Associated with the scheme would be an extensive scheme of landscaping, and I know that particular care was taken with regard to the proposals that none of the existing tree belts surrounding the site would in any way be impacted by these proposals.
That's not what the report says, though, is it? That there will be impact on the trees. I've just read it, and I'll struggle to find it now. But in one of these reports, it does say that there will be a significant impact on the trees as a result of this.
There certainly would have been a significant impact on the trees had the access been taken off London Road, and certainly there'd have been a greater harm to residential amenity. The current proposals show access off Old Common Road, and so whilst there'd be a loss of the trees for the access road there, which are about, I think the tree is about 20 odd years old, elsewhere there'd be no impact on the tree cover within the site.
Are you finished? Okay. I don't want to encourage you, but carry on.
Just to seek clarification, the mention was of the sports facility to be operated by the council. I assume we're referring to the multi-use games area as being the mitigation for the loss of the kickabout area to the residents of Riverdene. I'd like just to clarify with the officer what's the intended management proposals for that multi-use games area, and whether the use will be free open access and whether it will be free of cost so people wishing to use it.
Yes, it would be free open access at no cost.
I'm going to go first. And the simple question is, if the Many Down site arrangement had been updated to include the fact that it's now developable, would we have a different answer in analysing that site? Because we would have 2,000 acres that we own, and the football club wants 8. That's the question. Thank you.
I think it's clear from the assessment reports that we didn't look at Many Down in detail, which is for obvious reasons in 2009. Yeah. Even now, my understanding is, and I'm not closely involved in Many Down, but that development on that site at best wouldn't be happening until 2018, 2019, at best. I also understand that the draft master plan and the draft vision for Many Down has already been submitted to the local planning authority as comments in relation to the latest version of the local plan. Whilst Many Down may or may not be a suitable site for a football stadium, I think the issue really is one around timing compared to where we are now, and potentially with a decision on the site to the rear of the Hilton Hotel. Well, say potentially, decision was made in 2012, but where we are now in relation to advertising the loss of open space, and where we might be on works that could be undertaken on Many Down, which is clearly going to be many, many years adrift between those two scenarios, I would suggest.
Thank you. Councillor James, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. A number of questions. First of all, you mentioned the 2012 decision, which says, noted the points above are without prejudice, subject to agreement terms, a conditional on planning consent, and there was something else, and agreed that part of the legally binding option agreements, blah, blah, blah. But it says without prejudice. At no point, my understanding of the decision, I sat for EPP and I sat at the cabinet meeting, from my point of view, from my understanding, it was without prejudice on the basis that the council were not actively supporting that site. They were supporting the principle that negotiations were worth having about that site in terms of drawing up a legal agreement. But at no point were the council promoting for development that site. Is that your understanding as well from that decision?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just have a read of that decision before I respond. The council endorsed the proposal in principle in its landowning capacity. That's, I think, the recommendation to Cabinet, and agreed that officers be delegated to agree the precise terms of the options agreement, which of course has happened, but that we brought back this the report that was called in with regard to the work that had been undertaken and the need to go forward with advertising the loss of open space. It doesn't in any way, that decision, prejudice the full consideration of the planning merits of the proposal by the local planning authority.
That's the wording you used was an interesting twist in the wording, because the report I have in front of me says noted that the points above are without prejudice, comma. So that's one statement, they are without prejudice. Subject to agreement of terms, that's another point, and conditional on planning consent, which is another point, and agreed as part of the legally binding something or the other. But the important thing there is it was without prejudice. It even goes on to say that were planning consent not achieved, the council would not support an appeal, which further evidences the council aren't supporting this, they are just facilitating discussion around the lease. So at that point in time, in 2012, the decision was made purely to enter into discussion, but without prejudice on the land. Is that your understanding of the 2012 decision was made?
I'm not quite sure of the point you're making, really. I think what I would like to draw your attention to is 8.1 of that report, where it says the report is not seeking to set out or seek a view from members on the planning merits of the proposal. then talks about the significant issues, which I've referred to before. And at 8.3 it says, if the council's landowner supports the proposal, whilst this will enable the project to move forward to planning application, it does not in any way prejudice a full and independent consideration of the planning merits of the proposal. And that's all I need to say, really. I really don't want to get into comments about where the comma was in a report that was drafted a number of years ago.
Oh, hold on. Have you finished, Councillor James? No. Would you like to continue? And I do have a list of other councillors.
I appreciate it, Chair.
You're going on the list.
Yes. But as a call-in person, I've been left to the last on the list, and as a ward member, I thought I may have greater priority. Yes. It's your report that you wrote in October 2009, when you wrote about the potential sites, if I can find it without knocking the microphone off, I can share it with you. It's good you're sitting next to me, really, isn't it? It said on the rear of Hilton Hotel, Plan 8A, BDBC would be required to establish the significance of harm to open space / landscape / events / cemetery. Now, in July 2012, a full report about the cemetery came to what was then Housing and Environment. I was sitting on it. We discussed the cemetery and realised it was an appropriate site. So that one was dealt with. But in terms of events, are you saying that all these matters you expect to be dealt with in one planning development control meeting? Or do you think we as a organiser of those events and we as landowner have a responsibility to do some work prior to agreeing to sign a lease?
I certainly think with the events, it's important to understand what the potential implications would be. And I know that was considered at the time of the March 2012 report, because I can recall myself having discussions with the relevant officers within this organisation. And whilst it was accepted that the proposals could provide parking for many of the events that took place, that the problem would arise with Basingstoke Live, where I think it was noted in the report that there could be up to 1,000 cars parked there. However, it was very clear that there are a number of areas that are available for parking of that sort of figure, accepting some of it will be dealt with on the site to the rear of the Hilton Hotel, in the area in the vicinity of the John Arlott Pavilion. So we were happy that if this proposal went forward, there would be minimal detrimental impact on the visitor experience for Basingstoke Live.
Obviously, the access to the sites you talk about are through Crossborough Hill. As you know, any event, particularly large events, have to have a licence from the police to hold that event. The proposals that you're outlining would mean that the emergency vehicles and the 1,000 cars visiting the site and the event organisers and the event participants would all have to go up the same narrow residential street. Now, it's always been clear in discussions I had as part of the Saving Basingstoke Live map that the police had lots of concerns about access to the site to deal with anything that could potentially happen when you've got 20,000 people in a beer tent. Do you think it's quite possible that in the event of us going down this route, that we would not be licensed to hold an event of that size on that site because the location wouldn't, there'd be no emergency vehicle access?
I think there would be emergency vehicle access, and I believe that's shown on the plans that were submitted with the various report. That the emergency vehicle access exists from London Road. No, you can actually access the rest of the playing fields area of the John Arlott Pavilion through the site to the rear of the Hilton Hotel.
I'm not convinced because I think there'll be a football stadium in the way, but we'll move on to the leisure park. Obviously, you mentioned one of the restrictions around the leisure park, certainly in early discussions in 2009, were some of the ambitions for the leisure park, a strategic regional leisure facility. That was in 2009. And just as we know from Gresley Road Triangle, that was an option in 2009 that clearly isn't an option today, things change and move on. In 2012, we very much had that ambition for the leisure park. The current status of those ambitions, from my understanding and reading reports, is that there are not a lot of people trampling our door down to make use of that site, and it's remained 5 years later. Only Air Kicks has changed it, which was nowhere near any of the sites that would have been potential football ground. So given that things have changed and moved on, do you now think the leisure park restrictions are possibly lessened over time?
I don't think I'm best placed to answer that question, to be honest, and look to one of my colleagues from Property Services to answer any views in relation to the current situation on the regeneration strategy. I'm not familiar.
Should I just answer, just in general terms, the council is in a procurement process at the moment on redevelopment for a development partner on the leisure park. So it's in a current position of investigating the options to have a development partner there. So that hasn't resolved one way or the other at the moment. It's in the middle of a procurement process.
So since 2012, when the club ruled out the leisure park, let's be clear on this, it was the club's decision that their preferred site was, they hadn't ruled it out, their preferred site was this, but one of the reasons for preferring that site was the ambitions for the leisure park. We're now 2.5 years on, and we're still in a procurement process because there's that many applicants to be our partner to go through.
Gee, I don't think I expressed it in quite that way. I think we're in the middle of a procurement process because it's an OG procurement process that does take some time. But I just wanted to highlight to members that the council is actively involved in processes on that site at the moment.
So for clarification, because we haven't signed up or signed a deal with a partner, at this state in time, there is no restriction on the council on what it does with the leisure park.
Correct, Chair. There's no restriction on the council at the moment, Chair.
Thank you. I've got some people who had their hands up who are not signatories. I intend to, by the means of process that we've agreed, to ask the signatories first, okay? So, Councillor Potter, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Tim, I mean, following the point that Councillor Gavin James, I think, made about the leisure park, as I understand it, our well-known firm of Montague Evans, Chartered Surveyors, is chosen by the council to promote the leisure park regeneration and find suitable partners. In regard to any of the discussions that centred around the suitability of the leisure park, can I take it Montague Evans would have been consulted at the time about the suitability of the site?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no. I think, as far as I was aware, DTZ produced a report looking at the leisure park, but I wasn't. I'll defer to a colleague, and if he's got any, might be able to answer your question.
I'm fascinated, really. I mean, obviously, we employ a firm of chartered surveyors to promote this particular site and seek actively partners for its regeneration, and they're not involved in the discussions around what might be suitable for the development of a particular area. But that apart, can I, and just for the record, I mean, in regard to the point you made some time ago, Tim, I mean, obviously a lot of this work was done 5 years ago, and it's a given, I guess, really, that the status and accessibility and availability of a number of these sites has changed over that 5-year period. And the chairman highlighted Manidown in particular. By any definition, where we own land, and this is a political decision, I know, Tim, but I mean, just in practical terms, would it not be sensible to reassess some of those sites 5 years on in regard to their suitability, or is it only the demands of the football club saying this is our preferred site that restrains us from doing that?
Chair, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the appointment of our agents for the leisure park, Montague Evans, was post-dated the decision on the football club.
Sorry, which date are you talking about?
I beg your pardon. I was hoping that Kevin would finalise the answer to your previous bit about Montague Evans.
Right.
Yeah.
Chair, they were appointed in 2013.
Which of the report are you very?
Well, I was answering the point that the agents that were are now involved in us procuring a development partner for the leisure park were appointed after the cabinet decision around the potential location of the football club was made.
But can I just remind everybody, we're only scrutinising the 2014 decision. Oh, Councillor Potter.
Well, I was going to make that same point, it seems to me, really, in terms of the current situation. I would be surprised, but perhaps this is the case, certainly, that those who are commissioned to promote the leisure park are not engaged in a discussion around its suitability for a major proposal of this nature. But, okay, I hear what is said in that regard. But can I just come back to the fact that in terms of Manidan, I know you've mentioned this, Chair, already, but here we have substantial land owned by the borough where its status has now changed considerably from that was listed within the 2009 report, which offers an opportunity that we didn't have before. Is anybody able to consider that at this juncture? Has there been any indication that that could be included in any way within the analysis of Manidan?
I think your original point, you probably answered better than I could, Councillor Potter, in that, yes, Manidan wasn't considered originally. Yes, the circumstances have changed in the 5 years, and yes, it would be possible if this council wanted to review its approach to allocating land for a football club. The issue is, I think, one of timescale, which I referred to earlier, and you referred to it yourself, the views of the football club. The issue of delay is one, I think, for them, and how critical that delay would be. But I think we need to realise that if Manidan was looked at, and it would be, I think, 2018, 2019 at the very earliest, that any development could take place, depending on the progress with the local plan. And I believe an awful lot of work has been done already, and the vision and the master plan for that site has already been submitted. So I think it would be quite difficult to now look at that site as a potential for a football club.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Paul Harvey. I do have others who had their hands up first, but Paul Harvey is the signatory. Thank you.
Tim, can I ask you, I'm just interested in this whole thing about
That's why I asked.
timing and about the point about, you talk about delay and in a process that might be...
I beg your pardon, you're not a signatory, are you?
No.
You have to go back in the list.
That's fine, that's fine. I was
Councillor Miller. Thank you, Councillor Miller. And Councillor Cubitt.
I mean, it's not fair on Tim Bosky, but I do think that Councillor James's point reference to without prejudice is very relevant. And I think that the answer just made now by Tim reaffirms the fact that, in fact, the decision has prejudiced what's been taken forward, because what Tim's just said explicitly is that so much work has now been done, it's a given that it's this site. I mean, that's effectively what you've just said. That is in answer to Councillor James' direct contravention of what the decision of 2012 said would happen.
I wouldn't agree quite with your analysis of what I said. Well, the issue is one for the football club. They have expressed an interest in the site to the rear of the Hilton Hotel. They were not offered a site in Manydown. I accept that. Because They could be, yes. I mean, it's a decision not certainly not one that I could take, but it would need to be discussed with them whether indeed that was an option that they would want to look at in view of the timescales and the drive that is behind this project.
I suspect we're getting hooked up with different things here. Can you just clarify, Councillor Kubert?
Well, just as a clarification, we're not getting hooked up. It's just about the decision-making process. If it was very explicit that it was without prejudice in 2012, and if it transpires now that what Tim is saying is because so much work has been done, that therefore implies that the decision that was taken in 2012 was final. But more importantly than that, Tim has made frequent reference to the football club's preference, and I just want to flag that's all well and good, and we all support the aspirations of the football club, and we all want a really exciting stadium in Basingstoke that we can be proud of, that can support a football team. But it cannot be to the detriment of the residents of Basingstoke, and it cannot prejudice the decision-making process that aspiration or that the Basingstoke Football Club's overarching desire is. There has to be a level of pragmatism in terms of what the right answer is. And what worries me is that, and Councillor Parker was correct to flag up, the fact that if you were a rational organisation, not you, Tim, but we, the council, and were we to do what we were supposed to have done also in the local development framework, which was go through rankings to determine suitability of sites, we would not have gone through that whole process of supposedly transparent decision making and then take an opposing decision. It seems perverse. And I think that I'm just trying to bring together, otherwise I can see we get all going off at a tangent. I think that's the kernel of this call-in, is that A, the decision in 2012 was without prejudice. B, we went through what on the surface to the public was a rational determination of suitability of sites. And then we chose an irrational decision on the basis of a partner that is not the residents per se, and it is our land. This is our land. This is the council's land we're talking about, not the football club.
Thank you, Councillor Kubert. I don't think that requires an answer from yourself, Tim. No. So I've got. The point you're making is very rational and is related and germane to the point we're here for. Councillor Harvey, do you want to ask Tim questions?
Thank you. Just one, really.
Okay.
It leads on from what Councillor Kubert has just said, but from another point. At any time, to the best of your knowledge, Tim, have there been any time pressures expressed to you that this decision has got to be taken on this day, otherwise everything will fail? Or has that not been a part of the discussion? Has there been any, as it were, absolute deadlines attached to this in the context of your work on this project so far?
No absolute deadlines. I think it's an impatience perhaps dealing with a large bureaucracy and the length of time it's taken from reports in 2009 to a decision in 2012 and then where we are today. I'm not aware of any critical dates in relation to this. If you just bear with me, I'll just check with Nick Collins, who's been dealing with the club over the more recent past. No, my advice was correct. There are no drop-dead dates that we've been given.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Does anybody else on the committee who hasn't asked a question of Tim Bosky want to say anything?
Yeah, I have one final other question which kind of links in with the pink papers, but I don't think will prejudice anything, which is to do with the fact that originally it was stated that it would be wholly inappropriate for Camro's site to be a retail park. And suddenly we've got a transaction that incorporates Camro's being sold as a retail. And I find that very perverse in the extreme on so many levels. not least of which is our need for more housing and the perfect site that site is for housing and how inappropriate it is to be retail. So I wonder whether Tim could explain why originally in the papers it was explicit that it was not a retail site and why now it's being proposed that a site of which we are 29% owner is now only being marketed as a retail site when that's the least financially remunerative to our taxpayers and the least aspirational that our taxpayers want, which is more housing.
Are you the right person to answer this
I was going
question?
to say, when it comes to values, I'm not the right person to answer, to be honest. As I thought the situation was quite the reverse to the one you've just set out, but I'd need to consult with property services on that one.
Okay. Well, it seems. It seems to me, Mr. Bosky, that you're at the natural end of your questioning, and so if we bring forward the person from property, they might help us further after hearing from Kevin. Kevin, do you want to add anything? We'll swap now, Tim. Yeah. Thank you for your time and helpful.
Are you using the signatories again first? Or?
Yes. Yeah. Please. I'll just tell him. And if you want to go home, Tim, feel free.
That's not seconded.
It's not seconded. Okay. Oh, we got two for the price of one this time. I thought we were just getting Mike Bovis. So we've got Nicholas as well. Did you want to start? Okay. Now, just to ensure you understand, the new questioning, we'll get the signatories first, and then we have the rest. Okay? Please be brief.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I just wanted to pick up on that question in terms of values, actually, because I think that's quite an important point. Why couldn't possibly residential work? Well, it's simply down to the values. If you're looking at about a 6-acre site in total at the Camrose, generally speaking, you probably get about £600,000 an acre in total there, so £3.5 million of capital value. That's worth just talking about the enabling costs for this particular stadium development. The developers are currently looking at about £7.5 million for the stadium itself. You then have obviously got the value of the council's interest, and of course there's more value attached in terms of the Camrose estate, who own the other 71% of the land. So you've got about £10 million worth of enabling costs. Residential at the moment in Basingstoke and in that location will not meet that cost. The most valuable use in the current day is for out-of-town retail supermarkets.
Sorry, I'm a little confused. I mean, I'm not a property expert, you are, but I thought Resi produced a mil per acre, and I would not define that site as an out of town. It's in a city, Basingstoke. So I mean, again, I know we've got the valuation here, but I just find that a bit odd.
No, I appreciate your point. I mean, it is defined as an out-of-town retail location. I appreciate it's not literally out of town, but when you're looking at the estate across the road where you've got Toys R Us, that's defined as an out-of-town retail park. The agents are valued at that level, and that's generally the feel of the market at the moment. But I appreciate your view.
Okay. Councillor Regan.
Yeah, I'm not no financial expert or anything, but obviously you read the papers and read the tea leaves. And certainly in terms of retail's taken a battering, is it not, through the internet? Since this was first looked at in 2009, we're now 5 years down the road. Is retail still the best rather than housing, which housing all seems to go up and retail is being threatened?
The simple answer to that is yes, it still is. Obviously retail has had its challenges.
As a town, Basingstoke's done reasonably well, in truth. Our sort of retail voids are certainly not bad as a lot of areas. We've had the values re-examined by external consultants, and they still, stick with those values. So the answer is yes.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I will float this worry, I don't know if it is a genuine one, is that what I've seen happen in the past is that when you get a new retail park, it sucked in ones, like say Staples will move from one part to another, and the same will happen again, and you leave empty stores elsewhere. So they're obviously chasing the declining market.
Really, it's back to the same point. Retail values are what they are. The approach that was adopted was that we would go along with the landowner approach to this. There's still the planning side, which may or may not favour retail in that location. But basically, the only thing that makes the numbers stack up is retail type development.
Thank you, Councillor Regan. We've got. I'm bypassing you for the moment, Councillor Harvey, with the signatories. Councillor Potter.
Can I just return to this, Chair, if I may? I mean, obviously the briefing note we've got that is clarifying the deal structure under the option agreement makes, sorry, I did beg pardon, it's the white briefing note that we had, sorry, the white briefing note covering proposed sale of land, lease of land at Old Common Road and legal documents and deal structure. It's purely a, was it 2.5 page briefing note? I'm not sure who that went to, certainly went to me as a member of the committee, but it's akin, obviously, if I may, to Councillor Cubitt's point, and I, like her, expressed some surprise about what we're being told about the relative valuation in regard to the use of the land, but the very clear statement that's made about the Camrose site, Chair, is that the land is considered essential to enable Basron, we'll come back to Basron I'm sure tonight in due course, to provide for a retail scheme. Basron's ability to raise funding is thus dependent upon its ability to have an option to purchase this land and deliver the retail scheme. So it follows, presumably, that if they are not able to provide for a retail scheme, and we're being told that that would raise a higher level of funding, because either some of the figures are not quite as are being suggested, but or alternatively planning approval isn't given for a retail scheme in that location, this deal would flounder. It seems to suggest that this is an absolute necessity for Basron to be able to make the finances stack up. Are we really saying that about this site? Is that what is being said? Because it appears to read that way. Basron's ability to raise funding is thus dependent upon its ability to have an option to purchase this land, that will be given by the council obviously, and deliver the retail scheme. If that doesn't happen, the funds don't stack up. Is that what we're dealing with here?
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Would you like to contribute?
Thank you, Councillor Potter. In essence, the answer in short is yes.
Before you come in, can I just ask an associated question? Are we going to then be faced further down the line, if this is approved by the Cabinet, with being told, well, we have to give planning permission because otherwise the deal will fall apart and the football ground has already been built?
No, at the end of the day, the planning side of the Basingstoke and Dean is a separate issue. They would have to consider the pros and cons, the merits of the planning application. But it's true, if planning permission wasn't granted, we can't see any way the numbers would stack up.
Thank you. Councillor Laura James.
In relation to the Camrose site, I think you said it was 6 acres. Is that correct?
It's 6.5, which we own 29%. 29% we own.
How many houses, affordable houses, could you build on 6.5 acres of land? Just an average.
or a mix, or what are you thinking of? Flats, or I've just got no idea, quite frankly. It would just, whatever I said would just be a pure guess.
I'm happy for you to give me a guess. Let's go with, if we were going to build a standard 2 or 3 bed, all affordable, quite small units with small gardens, how many do you think we could get? I'm not sure about density. We have a policy in relation to density. Maybe Tim can help you on. 40 to the acre. So how many units could we build on that?
Well, I think we were just talking about, we're looking on the older Marston Road triangle of something that's about 6 acres. And we're looking at about 100, 110 units on that. So I think 40 to the acre times 6 at 240 would be incredibly high density. If you're talking flats, yes, yeah, but.
So how many units was it again? Just 150. And of the 100, you're saying that our ownership of that site is 29% of that site. Is that correct?
I think the important thing to bear in mind here is the shape of the land. It's quite rectangular. Our bit is a sliver along the back. So in isolation, there's not much we can do with it. Secondly, it's let for 65 years to the football club without review at 60 pounds or something like that a year without review. So although it's our land as a freehold, we don't have possession of that land.
Is this relevant, this questioning about the housing? Is this relevant?
Not a point of order, but because the issue is the whole project is dependent upon selling that piece of land for either retail or what Councillor James is saying is houses. So selling that piece of land is a key issue. It's the other side of the equation.
If I can help, part of the decision that we are scrutinising is that the Camrose site will be developed for retail. It's all part of the same decision. So that's part of this same decision. If you read the decision notice. Yes, thank you. I'd just like to understand, and I'm not sure this is yourselves or whether it's Kevin, but in relation to how the new stadium will be financed, the condition for the release of the borough's land at the Camrose is that the new stadium is built first. We have a red flag on the probable planning permission on the site on the Old Common Road. And there is no guarantee that the Camrose site will get planning permission either. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do I understand correctly that the borough will not sell the Old Common site to Basron without planning permission?
Well, in fact, they need planning permission on both sites. So yes.
Councillor James is asking relevant questions. Okay, then, if Councillor James will off you go.
Okay, now we're moving into pink paper territory, but I don't want to close the meeting. But all I'm saying is that what Councillor James just said is actually not correct, because we're not selling to Basron. Because if you look into the legal detail, and this is where I have a lot of issues with the legal documents, is that a lot of the contractual, in fact, all the contractual obligations under the main agreement are absolutely nothing to do with Basron. Contractual arrangements are with BTL. Basron seems to have a lot of rights, it has no obligations. So the contractual obligations are with BTL. And the option...
Please don't explain that anymore, because it is getting into a big paper.
No, but it's pivotal to Mike and his team's answer, because the option isn't with BTL, it's with Basron. And it's only about 29% of the land. So when all of us get told by the officers that it's okay, we've got a carrot, because the land at Old Common Road won't be get handed over until the development's finished, and the Camrose then can't be sold, That's not 100% accurate, because actually the option with Basron is only for our 29%, and the other percentage of that site they could do whatever they want, whenever they want, without the development of the stadium being finished, as I understand from reading of the documentation, which is why these T's that need to be crossed and I's need to be dotted to link all of the documents is absolutely pivotal. And when you look at all the parties, still got an inherent value, even if we...
Thank you, Councillor Kubert. Could you like to not stray into the pink papers, but answer the question in general, please?
I was just trying to answer the simple question, but I without straying into the confidential area. And I think that in essence, for this deal to happen, it is necessary to get a planning permission of the old common road, because obviously that's what you need to do to actually build the stadium, and also retail planning permission for the Camrose site, because that's what will fund it. And that's in a simple sense, that's the deal. Yes, there are complications in terms of ownership, and if you want to get certainly into the heavy level deals, the legal stuff, that's something we should take in confidential session.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor James.
Sorry. So, as I understand it, and from the last meeting, and that we were not looking at, in relation to the decision, the retail park coming forward for 2 years. Is that correct?
I mean, obviously, it's dependent on planning, and it is sequential. The idea being that the stadium gets built first before any release of the land for the Camrose ground. But clearly, if you're a developer, you'd want both planning permissions in the bag before you did one, would you not?
The sum agreed for the old common site is 85,000 to be reinvested by Basron in a mugger. So in effect, the old common site is being given for free. Is that correct? Yes.
Excuse me. I am the only one allowed to talk at the moment, please. We cannot discuss that element further in public. Is it the white papers? No, I'm only asking, is it in the white papers? Yes, it is. I beg your pardon. Please answer the question, Mike. Off you go. Answer the question then.
I think the issue is that this is part and parcel of the wider deal, and obviously that has been articulated, but the detail of that I think is set out in the report we've had and submitted as a confidential appendix. And I think that's where you really need to understand the detail of the deal, I think, in that sense. So all the white papers give you are the ballpoint figures and the fact that there's overage, and that's all non-confidential. Okay.
So in effect, what we're saying is that Basron, and needs obviously Onley has said something different tonight, but is expected to forward fund the stadium. Is that correct?
Basically, what will happen, it's worth just talking a bit about the context of the deal here. You've got Basron, which are the developer in essence. It's a joint venture between Lamron Estates and chairman of the football club, so it's all linked. And this particular joint venture developer will be looking to secure planning. That's the first point, apart from assembling the land, of course, which we're discussing. Now, once they've done that and spent the money on the planning, they will then look to bring in a financial institution, which is commonplace in the property market. And it will be that financial institution which actually provides the funding to actually provide the legs to all of this deal. Now, because of the way we've structured the deal, the stadium needs to be built first. So that financial institution is going to have to forward fund a considerable amount of money to Basron to provide for that stadium. And then Basron will be procuring and managing those works on behalf of the football club. So it's all linked together.
So if planning permission is not given for Camrose redevelopment, what legally happens to the already built stadium if Basron is dependent on recouping its outlay through the development of the Camrose?
I suspect our enforcement officers might have an issue there. It wouldn't actually be built at all. You would need to secure planning before the stadium was built. So in terms of the order of matters, you've got the landowner issues. That's what we're discussing tonight. You've then, if that goes forward, you've got the developer would have to get planning permission on all of the sites. That's the artificial pitch on the Costello, the football stadium on the Old Common Road, and the retail park on the Camrose. Now, because of what I've just talked about in terms of funding all of this, they all hang together. They're going to have to get all of those planning permissions. If it's like a deck of cards, if they don't get one, it will all fall apart, and no stadium will be built. Now, to protect ourselves, it's worth just elaborating very quickly on this. We don't want to fetter the Old Common Road site forevermore in a day. So within the legal documents, we've set out what's called long stop dates. So the developer has to actually produce the goods within a certain timescale. They've got to submit planning within a certain timescale. They've got to start works within a certain other timescale, and they've got to finish it. If they fail to comply, then the council, at its discretion, can terminate those agreements.
Thank you. Sorry, you coming back, Councillor Parker? No, I just asking you. Are you going to? Okay.
Yes, I'm bouncing back. Thank you, Chair. I'd like just to address the suggestion in the report. That's the earlier reports and supporting reports of a wider community facility that will be provided at the proposed location by the football club. But I would like to ask the officer to confirm with me that the community use of the stadia is not free, but that it will be chargeable reasonably by the football club at commercial rates.
Correct.
So would the officer care to rationalise how that would then seem to be a shared facility for the benefit of the community, when in actual fact members of the community already currently have unfettered access to the whole site?
Now, under the terms of the draft agreements that we've provided thus far, I can't recall the exact wording as I haven't got the documents in front of me, but basically we have agreed and we have retained rights to use the stadium, but we would pay reasonable costs. We had to recognise through negotiations that the club are here to try and attain self-sufficiency and remain financially viable. If the council had rights to use the stadium for free, then obviously that would cause issues there. So we have negotiated rights. We've reserved that the costs will be reasonable, and there'll be a dispute resolution clause if we consider those particular costs aren't reasonable. But what we haven't done is we haven't got free rights.
Thank you for that, but the use of the word reasonable, I have investigated this with officers, is being used and touted, but reasonable actually eventually through law becomes interpreted as commercial rates. And the point I'd also like to have confirmed with the officer that the club might reasonably expect to charge for anybody else to hire the facility.
I think the answer to that would be yes, that's true. I mean, there is a market out there, and if there are other uses that they can use it for, I don't see why they wouldn't, really.
That's fine. It's the answer I expected, but it's potentially contrary to what the reports have previously been suggested. It's the point I'd like to make, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. We've got another signatory. to ask a question, Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you. Firstly, on the back of that point, in terms of the other uses, I imagine that's quite an important revenue stream for the club. Given its location, it's very likely that there will be significant restrictions. It's not just planning, it will have to go through the licensing committee in order to get a license. It will also, so there will be, and obviously the planning itself can put restrictions on timings, everything else. Would there be a danger in terms of the business plan of the club if there were significant restrictions on, in terms of licensed activity or in terms of events activity, of what would be permitted on the site?
I think we just can't answer that, to be honest.
In terms of the site itself, as you're the property guys, and I know it was painful for Tim to go back to 2009, I'm hoping that one of you remembers 1978. Obviously, the quick history lesson for those who don't know is obviously the old common was once called the Common, and it became old in 1978 when, to make room for the ring road, the common effectively moved to where it is today in Basing, and the trustees signed it off. Obviously, the laws around that, which I think was set in 1969, and you have to have the Secretary of State sign over the deeds. Do you know, in terms of, because obviously when it was done, then there was no building on the site, it was left as green open space. A third of the site is now called Black Dam, the other bit is obviously Ring Road. Was there any covenant in that title deed on what the council can do with the land when they took the freehold or gifted the freehold by the people of Basingstoke, because obviously primarily it was common land, not council land. So what's in the covenant of that restricts any use? Is there anything? And also, do we actually have the title certificate? Because I noticed one of the people in the pink paper wasn't given sight of it.
The answer from legal behind me is no, there weren't any.
Okay, now we're going to the general members of the committee, and Paul Harvey is first. Yeah.
My question in regard to where I was looking, Chair, at the relationship between BASRON and the planning permissions has already been asked and answered. So no, I'll pass on this occasion and come back.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Potter, next.
Could Michael Nicholas just tell me a bit more about Lamron Estates Limited or Lamron Developments, which I don't think I recall being mentioned before this evening. That might just be me, but if I did my own check, Chairman, in regard to Lamron, and it's interesting that what these two organisations have in common is common directors. We examined BASRON last week, and we found that the two main directors were, as we know, Mr. Rafi Razak and Mr. Malcolm McPhail, Scott McPhail. And Mr. Scott McPhail and I don't know what relation this person may be, Mrs. Nora McPhail, are directors of Lamron as well. So there's, to me anyway, interesting connections there. But interestingly, Lamron itself says on its own website at the moment, under the heading of Basingstoke Town Football Club, description, a joint venture has been agreed with Basingstoke Town Football Club to redevelop their existing stadium at the Camrose Stadium site. Plans are for a 100,000 square foot retail park and in turn to relocate the football club to a site west of the Hilton Hotel in Black Dam. Now, they give some interesting timescales, which I think are probably a bit optimistic, putting it mildly, talking about the new stadium starting in the summer of 2014. Well, probably that's a bit optimistic, isn't it? But I just want to get clear in my head what Lamron Development or Lamron Estates have to do with this, because I haven't seen them feature within any of the legal agreement documentation that we're not going to talk about, but I've got in front of me. I've seen plenty of references to BASRON, but Lamron now claim to be the joint venture developers in regard to this project. They have a common director or two, but I don't know what else is going on. Can you advise me where Lamron feature in this, and why have we not heard about it before this evening?
Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Okay, right. Well, I'll try and answer that one. Basically, Basron are a joint venture, 50-50, between Lamron, so they own half of it, and Razak, who you've talked about before. Now, Lamron Estates, let's just talk about them very quickly. Their lead, or the chap you've already mentioned, actually, is called Malcolm McPhail, and he's a developer. Has been pretty successful, actually, locally. It's probably worth saying, giving examples of what he's done. He developed the Renaissance office buildings on Basing View, which was the last development actually on Basing View. They're all fully let at the moment. They were built in, I think, the year 2000. And he's actually on site at the moment building the new Premier Inn on New Road, where the building known as Vista used to be before it was recently demolished. That's his activities currently in this town. He's a property owner. He owns various assets, and he's prominent in the locality.
I mean, forgive me because I'm not the experts that we have on our right, but I mean, in regard to the respective roles of Lamron and Basron, why does Lamron not feature within the legal agreements in any place?
Yeah, Basron is an SPV, which means it's a special purchase vehicle. Again, not uncommon to be set up for developments. Sorry, special purpose vehicle. Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant to say. Apologies. And that's a joint venture between the companies I've mentioned.
It's interesting there. I mean, as an aside, perhaps, I mean, Lamron claimed to have secured an option over 60 acres of land at Black Dam. That would be a fascinating development. I don't know much about that either, but perhaps that's another prospective site for the football ground. But there is absolutely no reason then, you're saying, for Lamron to appear within any of the agreements that are made between the parties who are going to be parties to this agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I think I've answered that one. It's a shareholder of the SPV, which is Basron, so it's part and parcel of Basron.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Miller. I know it's rare for us to come to you because you're not a signatory. You don't want to ask a question this time. Thank you. Councillor Tate. Passing. Thank you very much. And Councillor Cubitt.
Since the principal role of the Scrutiny Committee is to be a critical friend, and since we could be here all night, and since we've had it already established that the Planning Commission on both Camrose and the Old Common is going to be absolutely essential and germane to any of what we're discussing, I have to say that whilst it's commendable that so much work has been done, it looks to me very much like actually some completely new thinking should take place. And just to put a spanner in the works, as a critical friend, I would recommend to the officers and to the Cabinet, possibly, that instead of having this highly convoluted, complex structure, which seems pretty opaque, and I'm always rather anti in principle, SPVs and individuals who haven't got a track record as developers, who happen to be chairmen of organisations that have... why, if we were to go back to the drawing board, since we've got so much money in our investment portfolio, earning almost next to nothing, don't we go back to the drawing board, we say, right, the only planning permission that's likely to be got, given the construct of the council at the moment, and given what the coalition government has said of councils, which is to build council houses, is to say, let's assume that the Camrose will only get planning if housing is sought. Assume that. And why, given we know that there are question marks over the financial solvency of the football club, instead of constructing something which involves a huge amount of risk that we, the council, are taking on, why don't we go back to the drawing board and say, why don't we allocate 7 million of the investment fund, build the stadium ourselves, and we have total control, and then rent it to the Basingstoke Football Club. And if, in the event that Basingstoke Football Club goes insolvent, then we can rent it to someone who is their successor and assign, and forget all of this, which whilst eminently commendable, seems to be hugely risky and seems not to benefit the people of Basingstoke completely, and seems to have a lot of question marks, which I believe, just as a relative newcomer, mean that this is never going to get past the start, and no one's going to collect £200 for this.
Thank you for your summing up.
Apart from the lawyer.
Yeah, thank you for your summing up. That's not a question for you. I'm next. I got two questions.
The portfolio holder answer that, Chair.
Well, if he wants to, yes, the portfolio holder may. Do you wish to answer or contribute?
I question whether that would actually be a wise way for us to approach this, because frankly, what you're suggesting here is that we scrap everything we've done so far, which okay, it's possible, we can do that. But I'm not sure that if we were to invest £7.5 million in a stadium, that we could reliably expect the football club to pay us a rent that would give us a reasonable return on it. Well, actually, that's a very good idea, Councillor James, and I will when the opportunity arises in the future, I shall be knocking on your door for your support.
Thank you very much.
Now you can come back, yes.
No, because what Councillor Isaac has just confirmed is that this project's not viable. That what you have absolutely no, it wasn't a trap. It's just a fact that if we can't get revenue generated on a £7.5 million spend on a stadium, then the stadium is not financially viable. But
it's not our responsibility.
But of course, because ultimately we'll own it under the lease.
Thank you, Councillor Kubert. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, yeah, I'm not. No, I'm perfectly content with what I've just said, because we are not funding the cost of the new stadium. We're not. It's not coming out of the public purse. And so the fact that it's a long lease that's granted to the football club at Peppercorn, the stadium, the cost of the stadium has been covered.
Okay, I've got two questions. Can we assume that the planning permission for both sides of this particular deal will be more or less coincidental at the same time? We can assume that. So the very minute the first application goes in, there'll be a second application in tandem. Okay. The next question is, are we getting anything for giving them 8 acres of our land? No, and please don't talk about the 85,000 that they're going to contribute to funding the multi-use games area. Because if they give us 85 grand and we have to spend it on the multi-use, that means we're not getting anything. So are we getting anything else for our 85 acres? 8 acres?
We are. I mean, it's the whole package. It's the stadium that we're insisting is built first, where we'll be retaining rights. There's no rent. So it's the whole package. It's the stadium. It's the money from the cameras. So in total, it's £935,000. It's the overage potential. It's the whole deal.
Councillor James.
As part of that package that we get as a borough, what impact will that package, as in the retail park, have on the town centre and the Brighton Hill retail centre? Will there be any impact? And is that work been done?
I wish I could be more helpful, but I think this has been said before. Impact on the town, other impacts, of which there are many, are all within the planning arena. A retail impact assessment will inevitably be part of the planning process. At this stage, from a landowner's point of view, we're not looking at a retail impact assessment. There's considerable costs associated with that, and the developer will be picking all of that up as part of the planning process.
So, can I be clear then? As a landowner, we are giving 29% of our land on the Camrose site. We're giving our 8.5 acres on the common, or not common now. It's not called common. It's called open space for free. All right. So, but we haven't done an impact assessment as to what the retail park will have on our struggling town centre. Is that right? As a landowner, we haven't done that.
Well, we're not giving anything. As Nick explained, it's a package deal whereby we are getting a stadium built as part of the proceeds of development. We're also selling our part of the land at the Camrose ground if they get planning permission. And yes, you're right, we haven't done the retail impact work because that's part of the planning process, and it's not something we want to pay for. It's something we want the developers to do if they go ahead with the planning application.
Councillor Beerman, you're welcome back. I beg your pardon?
Gavin James.
I'm sorry, Councillor Gavin James is next. I do apologise, Councillor Beerman. You're still welcome back, but you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a lot of talk about is we've been on a long journey and a five-year journey for the football club, and I have every sympathy with the football club because for 5 years they've kind of done everything right. They've behaved with integrity throughout. I remember when the first idea was touted and Rafi Razak invited me and the Southam councillor separately, I don't know why we had to go separately, but we did, to his offices to explain what his ambitions and views were. So, you know, full credit to the club. They've behaved impeccably throughout. I think the council have failed them as much as the council have failed the residents of both Eastrop and to a certain extent the Southam residents as well. But to make sure not all of this is wasted, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what happened between 2009 and 2012. It seems very little. In 2012, I understand we'll be doing these negotiations. If, and I appreciate it's not a simple case of just going through, crossing out Old Common and writing Leisure Park, there's a bit more to it than that. But based on what we've learned, based on the shape of the agreement we've drafted, based on where we are and the bits of work that have done, is it reasonable to say that if the council were to have a new preferred location, their own preferred, for the first time, we've never declared a preferred location, the club have, we haven't. If our preferred location was the Leisure Park, would a lot of the work that we've already done still be relevant in terms of translating that to a new potential site, rather than all wasted?
I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I mean, the basic principle of the deal might be somewhat the same, but you've got the different restrictions that apply to different sites. You've got different, covenants or issues that affect different sites. And don't forget the fact is currently we're in the middle of an OG compliant process for procurement on the Leisure Park as well. So that's where we are. But in theory, if members decide to choose another site, part of the process can be taken elsewhere, but you'd be starting off, not quite from scratch, but quite a long way back.
Because obviously the site at the Leisure Park is not defined as green open space, it's already identified as commercial leisure use land, so you wouldn't need to go through the public consultation that you would for the Old Common. That would obviously offer a shortening of the process. And obviously from a planning point of view, you'd have to say there's a lot less planning restrictions. I know we're not in a planning meeting and therefore you can't sort of say too much, but clearly we're all aware of the policies that exist and the planning constraints on all the sites at the moment. Would you think that there is a chance that because of the lack of public consultation needed for the Leisure Park, if it had the will of full council behind it at the Leisure Park, that actually the process would not be perhaps prolonged as much as we've got to start all over again in another 5-year process, that we could reasonably achieve that probably in 3 years or 2 years?
I mean, you're straying into sort of quite a lot of hypothetical what ifs and maybes, to be honest. And what I would say is, so far, members have asked us to look at a regeneration of the Leisure Park based on a destination to bring a lot more visitors to the park. Whether or not the football club ticks that box and therefore brings about the regeneration of the rest of the park, that's obviously a judgment call. Yes, they probably would. But I think you're straying so far down the hypothetical. It's very difficult to say, to be honest. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a member call. If members decide that there are other sites that are better, that's fine, the case. Certainly, we are pursuing the leisure park on the basis of trying to bring in a development partner to bring about a regeneration of the whole park. And I say at the moment we're in the midst of a procurement process.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Bierman. Welcome back again.
Thank you so much, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. I never dreamt of going straight home after the other government. I just wonder, bearing in mind, I know this isn't a development control meeting, but every now and then the question of what happens in planning terms pops up. And the officers and portfolio holders said, yes, well, planning will sort that bit out. But we've not taken the advantage, as far as I can see, of this new, very dedicated and open pre-planning app meeting offer, whereby the parties sit down and talk about things seriously, now engaging members, so that one can look at the prospects. Now, we might not want to preempt things by looking at the old common site for the new stadium, but one could at least be starting on looking what the prospects are for dealing with the potentially ex-Camrose site, and could one encourage the parties that be to sit down and see whether that's even going to go anywhere? Because as I see it, there's a fair chance that members will not be inclined to say, yeah, that's fine, go for a retail park. There's some fairly good planning reasons why it shouldn't, and therefore if it doesn't stack up as a residential replacement for the site, then there are big problems before we even look at a new site. So perhaps one could start with looking at pre-app on the Camrose site, and then one could underline quite a few of the, or cross out quite a few of the unknowns.
I think the issue with that is that it will be up to the developers to make that decision when to move that forward. And if I was a developer, I think I want to make sure I had at least got an option on acquiring the land before I invested a lot of money in the pre-app and planning application process.
We could perhaps let them have it on the cheap because there's a public interest, or even free, yes, and we're part owners of the land after all. I mean, you know, a bit of accommodation and flexibility might mean that there's a way forward doing something like that.
I really think that's a planning issue. I'm not aware that planners give free or cheap advice to developers just because they like the look of what's coming their way, to be honest.
Could I just make sure now we understand this? We are not in the business here at a scrutiny meeting offering deals to anyone, okay? If they want to do deals, they have to do it in the proper way with the proper authority at the proper time, okay? And so I'm ruling out any further discussion on that particular suggestion, okay? Thank you, Councillor Bierman. Does anyone else have any burning issues for these two gentlemen? If not, I'll thank them for their courtesy and consideration and contribution and invite you to step down. Thank you. I said earlier on in the meeting that the next person that we would have available is Fergus Finlay from Legal. Before I invite him to the table, are there questions for him? I think we're getting to the point where we're nearly ready to sort out what we want to do. Are there questions for him? Please make sure that they stay within the white papers. There is a question. Thank you.
No, I'm more than happy because it's pink. That means that we can't talk about any of the questions, and I'm more than happy to have the questions at a future stage. Because I think if we all go pink now,
I'm not suggesting we should go pink. What I'm suggesting is we've spent a huge part of this meeting on white papers,
correct,
which meant that the issues can be examined in public,
correct,
and is seen by the public. And I would actually prefer not to go into confidential at all. But all I'm warning you as responsibility of the chair is, if you want to ask questions of Fergus that are only related to the pink papers, then we will have to go private. But you can choose not to ask questions in that case. Sorry, anyone else want to ask questions of Fergus? If not Fergus, thank you. We're only concerned about making sure that we don't stray into pink papers accidentally, and we want to try to get this scrutiny committee finished in public if we can. Thank you. Okay. The process that we agreed earlier, I haven't forgotten it, and so I'm just going to remind you now, is we will invite the signatories to make a last statement, and I hope it's not a book. Make a last statement, and that will conclude their individual contributions to the meeting, and the people on the committee will then just debate what to do next. Councillor Laura James.
So I did have a question for Councillor Izzet and also for Kevin Jaquest. I don't know.
Well, it's appropriate to ask them now.
Kevin, can I ask, in relation to the section 151, you outline your concerns around this, the viability and the financial soundness of this decision. Can you please outline what your concerns are?
Thank you, Chair. I think the section in the 24th of June Cabinet report is section 7.7, where I highlight really to bring to members' attention specific risks that are associated with the proposal, and that comment there dealt with the nature of the business case and the fact that it isn't possible to validate the business case in terms of the ongoing viability of the football club. It's based on assumptions that can't be validated. So there's some significant risk around the future viability of the football club. That was highlighted in the risk assessment, and also highlighting some of the mitigations that the proposed structure looks to deal with. And it was really my advice to members was around that risk, and I really can just point to the last sort of paragraph, which again talks in 7.9 talks about how the risk remains particularly unmitigated of the future viability of the football club in any new stadium. That, you know, the structure of the deal, there is a potential dowry, but that figure can vary significantly from nothing to a significant sum. So there is a risk around the viability of the football club in a new stadium, should all of the rest of it go forward. And really, I think really I would just pinpoint the last sentence where I say, Cabinet and i.e. members need therefore to determine if the public and community benefit of the proposed scheme outweigh the future possible risk to the council. And to me, that was the key point that I wanted to make and did make in that report.
Can I just clarify, what is the risk to the council of the viability of the football club? So what's our risk?
The risk to the council was as detailed in the June report, in that if all of the things go ahead, the stadium is built, the long lease is given to the football club, but the football club goes into administration, then depending upon how that administration panned out, it is not unfeasible that the council could be left with an empty stadium coming back into its possession, which it would then have to operate, or would have a cost associated with running. And those were detailed in the June report. So that was the particular risk.
Sorry, so in that report, do you outline what those potential costs would be if we were into that situation?
Vice Chair, sorry. Yeah, the report did highlight, I mean, again, only very outline broad range of figures, but said it could be in the region of between 50 and 100,000 pounds per annum in terms of sort of running costs. 50 to 100,000. Yeah.
Laura, did you have one for John Isaac?
It's very tricky now because the specific answer you've got is answered in the pink papers, but you haven't answered. But I can talk in generalities. When a company goes under, okay, let's talk in generalities. When a company goes under, there can be other people sitting behind the company that can have claim on the assets or leases that organisations can have, and it's that we as councillors need to have a look at when we refer to the pink papers.
Sorry, Vice Chair, my question of Councillor Izzet is that we've had our officer, our financial officer, chief financial officer, that's outlined his concerns in relation to the 151, and has clearly outlined those. Only has obviously further concerns in relation to the pink papers. Can I ask, in relation to those concerns, are you content to take, you obviously are, the decision forward, knowing those concerns?
To answer your question, Councillor, yeah, of course there are risks in any major development, but I think that the legal team and the officers generally have done a very good job in building in all sorts of safeguards to this proposed transaction. And as I've said earlier, we'll double check those to make sure that things are as watertight as possible. But let's try and get some context into this. If the football club went bust, then what this borough would have would be a new state-of-the-art stadium worth £7.5 million, or it certainly cost £7.5 million to build, and that would be then become an asset of the borough council if there was a default on the lease. But the other protection you've got to bear in mind is that the use to which the building can be put is very strictly controlled. It has to be used as a football stadium principally. So there's another safeguard there.
So I have a few more questions. But so in relation to your words, the football club goes bust, we end up with a stadium that can only be used for a football stadium. Our financial officer has said that, highlighting the risks, that the running costs would be in the region, it's only a region, he says, 100k a year. How would we fund that? And how do we move forward in relation to the future finding a football club to facilitate that stadium?
Well, it's all terribly bleak, this, isn't it? I'm quite confident that actually, if we had a brand new stadium, that we could put it to good use and generate revenues from it. So I'm not as pessimistic about that. And actually, subject to what the planning consent is, we as the owners could put it to other uses. It's the football club as the long leaseholder who is tied in to use it as a football club, not us as the freeholders.
Sorry, so Councillor, is it wouldn't be necessarily restricted to a football club, football stadium? You're saying it could be used for other things. What other things could we use a stadium for?
Well, there are going to be all sorts of amenities within the building, as far as I understand. I look into the offices there. We've got the opportunities to hold meetings there for people who want to hold meetings, conferences, and I dare say that it would be a good opportunity for us to enable some of our students, some of our school children to use the stadium. But clearly, this is not something we're contemplating. Basingstoke Town Football Club has been in business for a very long time, and so I've although their finances may not be as strong as one would like, there's every reason to think that they'll carry on as a football club. But I'm not as downbeat about the possibilities that exist for us in using that stadium for all sorts of things in the future, if it comes to that point.
To push you on this then, Councillor, can I ask, in relation to your fiduciary responsibility in taking this decision, because it ultimately is yours as the Cabinet member with the responsibility for this, you are happy with the level of risks, and you are happy in being told and highlighted the risks by our senior financial officer, you are happy to go ahead and continue to take this risk. I think it's important in the public tonight that we ask that question.
Let's not put words in my mouth. I'm not happy about it. It's a balance. There are risks in dealing with any investment involving a football club. But on balance, there are all sorts of safeguards built into this. And as a cabinet, we will make a decision on that. It's not me personally that's making this decision. It's as a cabinet.
And in relation to the risk, you will make a decision, Councillor, that we could possibly end up with an empty stadium that could be used for something else. Is there a risk to the community in relation to that open space? Have you assessed the value placed on the open space by the community and the town against ending up with an empty stadium, and which possibly could cost this borough 100k revenue? And how will we fund that? But have you considered the risks there? And are you still happy to make this decision on that basis?
This administration is confident about the future of Basingstoke Town, and we believe that what we're doing here is implementing a decision made in 2012, where there was a lot of support from across the parties to helping the football club in its aspirations to build a new stadium. And so I'm completely happy that on the balance of risk, this is a way forward. But what we have also said, and this is, I think, very important, is that we are going to consult fully with our residents to make sure that we understand what level of support there is for the football stadium as against the loss of open space at Old Common. So that's absolutely core to all this. So with anything we discuss tonight and goes on to Cabinet, it's declared to be subject to full public consultation. So I'm happy to put my trust in the good sense of the residents of the borough.
So in relation to the consultation, at what point will you determine that the good sense is that they don't want it? So is it that, say, 49% say that they want the stadium and 51 say they don't? Or how are you going to weigh, and how are you going to decide what is good sense? And as I said to you before, and I'll say it again, what weight do you give to the local community in Southam and the local community in Eastrop as opposed to the rest of the town?
You know, I can't give you a straight answer to that, because a clear answer, because I don't know what the outcome is yet. But clearly, I can tell you that we will pay close attention to the views of those residents most affected. We'll also take a good deal of account of the statistically valid survey that's being carried out of residents across the borough, which is now underway, as you know.
Councillor Gavin James.
I think all those questions about risk probably weren't particularly helpful if we all believe
that the club deserves and needs a new stadium, those risks would be the same wherever that stadium was built. The one critical difference, of course, is if the stadium was built in a area designated for leisure purposes with no residents nearby, the uses of the stadium would be greatly increased. And when you factor in your risk that will exist with football, because football finances are football finances and we can't predict the risk of the future, but we as a council, the best we can do if we want to support the club and have a new stadium is make sure that we can mitigate those risks best by our choice of location for the club. So do you think there's some work to be done around what could we use the stadium for in the leisure park? What could we use the stadium for in the old common? And are we mitigating risk better by placing it in an alternative location in terms of expanding on those uses? Does he agree?
Okay, can I just say, Councillor Parker, you had a question? Or have we finished? Go on then. I'm being very generous at the moment, and I'm going to want to move to the final part of the meeting after this question.
Thank you, Chair. My first and one only, unless it delivers to me the opportunity of a supplementary, is of Councillor Isaac, and it's just been touched on. And that's with regard to the undertaking made by the councillor at the last Scrutiny Committee meeting in regard to the agreed involvement by the ward members whose wards will be impacted by this decision to agree the public consultation, of which there's been big made of this evening, before it's sent out. When in actual fact, it turns out that, and I have the email audit for this, that meeting was held on Wednesday the 9th. On Friday the 11th, I received specifically, as a ward member of Eastrop, the agreed wording to be sent to the research team, the contract research team, for use on the 14th, wording already agreed by the leader of this council on the 26th of June. And I complained, and I do now also complain, that that wording is biased towards the football club. So I've asked the councillor if he can actually confirm how he intended to deliver on his undertaking, and as he hasn't, will he agree that any response from that particular questionnaire will be nullified?
No, you've had my answer on this, councillor. I've offered and have issued draft questionnaires to members of this committee and local ward councillors, asking for their input on the questions we propose to ask people in Eastrop and the other local wards, and we will be doing similarly in relation to South Ham, as I undertook to do. You know the reason that the one question that we were asking in relation to Old Common Road in the resident survey, which is a borough-wide survey, that survey was already underway. We managed to put a question in. We had time constraints. We got the question in, and now you're saying that you're not happy quite with the wording of it. Okay, sorry about that, but that is the case. We had to get on with it. But fundamentally, I am sticking with what I said to you.
Have you got supplementary?
No, I'd just like to make a statement that implies the complete arrogance that this portfolio holder is dealing with this matter. And contempt.
I'm not going to join you in that sort of slanging match. Thank you.
The agreed arrangement earlier on tonight was we would give the signatories an opportunity to make a last statement, and then the committee will finalise its arrangements. Do the signatories need to make or want to make a last statement? Okay, we'll go with Councillor Parker and then Councillor Jane. Yeah. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard, and in the last few moments of this meeting, the officer confirmed the reasonable and only correct warnings that officers have tried to point the Cabinet in the direction of highlighting the high-risk strategy of this proposal. And I would just want to make a comment that for over 30 years in my professional life, I assisted both corporate commercial clients together with private clients in their proposals for raising finance. And if a proposal similar to this, with the risk flags warnings as they are, was part of the proposals, the proposition put forward, it wouldn't even muster the warranting a meeting, let alone receive approval. It's been established tonight in relation to the potential sites and the analysis of those potential sites. It's been, I think, quite clearly demonstrated that, firstly, the site, Old Common behind the Hilton Hotel, was definitely not this council's preferred site, but most definitely the football club's chosen site. And that, I think, has been established without any possible argument. Equally, in the report in July 2009, again, it was confirmed by the officer that the site behind the Hilton Hotel in the site analysis was the one site that in comparison to the leisure park, that site definitely was indicated of having negative impact on residents, whereas the leisure park definitely did not. And equally, as evidenced in that report, it clearly shows that the site, the rear of the Hilton Hotel, and you have to really study this to get the proper picture, has actually only four scoring in relation to no harmful impact, whereas the sites at the milestones rates double in regard to that. They, in other words, what it is showing, but you've got to really know what you're reading, is that in terms of harmful impact, the site in relation to the leisure park comes out more favourably than the site behind the Hilton Hotel. There's clear evidence in all the documentation that insufficient consideration has been given to the potential of the loss of green open space. It ranks very low in priority, it would appear, by this current administration, yet we have something like 6 policy documents and strategies that are intended to safeguard green open space. And I believe this decision is actually also going against the current council policy. Suggestions have been made, Mr. Chair, this evening, quite sensible ones, that there is no reason why we cannot take some of the work that's already been done and move from one site to another site. If this if this current Conservative administration was actually had any desire to think about the local community and what the loss of that green open space will do to them. I'll pass over to my colleagues, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Chair. With the papers start with 2009, and I want to make a comparison of two things that have happened since 2009. One is to find housing for the next generation. One is to find a new home for the football club. Homes for people versus homes for football club. I accept homes for people are more important. The process seems very different. We all remember version 1 of the SLA with some more detailed assessments than we've seen here tonight on all the potential land for housing. We had version 2, 3 and 4 of the SLA, version 5 and version 6. We had a call-in process where we could call in sites, even those in the urban area were allowed to call in sites if it was in our ward to have them reviewed and looked at. And so more detailed analysis was done, those sites were taken away, reanalysed, come back and produced to get a list together of the potential sites for housing. We then went into numerous P&I, and I sat on the committee for 2 years and must have attended about God knows how many appointments in that 2 years, and I got out before it got really hot. But there were numerous meetings, and I know many around this table, and Councillor Cubic laughs because she remembers with so much pain all those P&I meetings, because she went to more than I did, where residents could come in and talk about the site and the sites they were concerned about. And we had a site selection process that was very detailed, more detailed analysis. There's always in the background, that's a matter for planning, but there was a very detailed analysis to draw up the sites. We then drew up all those sites, and with lots of information, lots of public meetings, to reach our conclusions that then went to full council, and are now going to go to a second round of public consultation, or been to a second round of public consultation, before we make a final decision. In comparison, over the same period of time, we had an internal officer's assessment of the potential sites for the football club, an internal document. We had EPP that looked at the club's preferred site. We had a single party cabinet choosing to make a recommendation despite some of the arguments at EPP, including my own, which is always a very impolite thing to do. And then we get to 2014 and we use the argument, oh, the decision was made in 2012. So very, very different processes, very different regard to residents. And that's got to be a concern, that the entire process has not been robust. We have not looked at alternatives at any point in the public domain. So I think that's become absolutely clear. I would never expect the moving a football club to take quite the same as establishing your local development framework and etc. But there should have been a lot more looking at alternative sites. In all those discussions, you look for all the papers, at no point, even in those SLA conversations, was there any discussion about the Camro site, about what the future of that is, of what the local authority wants from that site. It's always been about the club's preferred site. By comparison, if Wimpey Homes were to approach the council and say, we've got a preferred site for our housing, would we tick the box? Or would we refer to our local development framework? We'd refer to our strategies and our policies to consider whether or not it's appropriate just to give Wimpey Homes what they wanted? I'm pretty certain we wouldn't. We'd want to go back and say, how does it compare with our strategies? What are the alternatives? Because we've proven we've done that in housing. We haven't done it for the football club. We've short-circuited, short-cutted the process. And process is very important. We sit here night after night developing strategies and developing policies for a reason. So when things like this come up, we can measure them against those strategies, those policies. We can look at alternatives, not in one SPG meeting, but in public meetings that the public can attend, they can listen into, they can read and they can hear. So although my personal view is that the Old Common is the wrong site, I still think that had we had the proper meetings and done the proper process in the previously, and we'd come to the conclusion that it was the Old Common was the best site in the interest of the council, the calling probably wouldn't have happened. All this means we failed the club. I alluded to earlier, Rafi Razak and the club's executive were very quick to approach us in Eastrop to say, we've got an idea, and this is the idea we're looking at. They were open and honest and very frank with us about what they were hoping to do. I agreed when I met them on the first occasion that I wasn't going to rally up a protest group. I was happy for them to consult with the public, listen to the public's views and take my steer from the residents, because I'm here to represent them, not lead them. That consultation, which the portfolio holder admitted last time we met in the early part of this meeting, He'd never seen the consultation document, he'd not seen the consultation questions, and yet in making the decision, he's given some credit or credibility to them. So there is a concern there. And I don't blame the portfolio holder entirely. He's inherited a decision and taken it in good faith that his predecessors had made the effort to do all the necessary work. I think it's become clear to 2 meetings that they haven't. For that reason, I think that the call-in has been absolutely valid. I think everything that concerned us has been proven, and I think going ahead with the decision would be fundamentally flawed, very risky. And we owe it better to our residents. We owe a lot more to the club as well, who have been incredibly patient, incredibly tolerant of a council that really hasn't got its act together over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Councillor James. Now, Councillor Bierman, you said you had a sentence to say.
Chair, thank you. I have to say that as a signatory to this process, I really feel for once that I've done a really useful public service. And I say this with some regret to the football club because potentially it's going to be agonising for them, but this was necessary has been proven by the mass of information that has already come forth, and there's more, I think, to be considered. I feel that what has been discussed now should have first been discussed about 5 years ago and then been built upon, and that's what has been proven here. Sad that a lot of officer and member time has had to be wasted to get here, but for heaven's sake, colleagues, ask the Cabinet to review the thing almost from square one. Where's the right place, and what's the right way to handle the Camrose site if it's vacated? That's all I plead for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bierman. Councillor Laura James, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thank you. Following on from what Gavin James said, I think and I think it's been said at the last meeting, I think we have to have regard for what the inspector said in relation to Manydown and looking at our responsibility as a landowner. I think that we do need to have regard for policy, and I think we've been told that we have to have regard for policy in moving forward, and we cannot say that we are separate to the planning authority because we've been told that we cannot say that. And so I think it's essential that we do. We've been told tonight by officers that they haven't considered things because that is the remit of DC, of development control, and that clearly is not what the inspector said. So I think that we are again acting unlawfully, and I think it is essential that we look at that. I want to say that I just think that we as a council have not paid enough regard to the piece of open space, and I think we dismiss it as a piece of open space and a value that it has. And I think if you don't live in the town and you're not experiencing the amount of development that is taking place in our town centre, you will not understand the concerns that we have as a town on the loss of such important pieces of open space. I am personally not an anti-development councillor. I'm pro-development, but if we are going to have development, we have to protect these pieces of open space. It's essential that we protect them. If we don't, the quality of life of people is going to be reduced, and I think that we have a responsibility as a council to consider those. And also, what I'm really concerned about, it seems clear tonight, what is being said is we have an exceptionally experienced chief financial officer who has outlined concerns to us, which have been dismissed really or ignored in taking forward this decision. And what really it boils down to, the fact is, we will get a stadium at the end of the day. And we're going to end up with a stadium. And so the prize is the stadium. So they're not really thinking about the football club. It isn't about the future of the football club. It's about that we end up with a stadium that we can use for other things. So it's about thinking about that and what would be the benefit to this council. What is the benefit to the football club? I don't want a football club that is going to go broke, or that a football club that's going to find itself in financial difficulty. We should be acting prudently and thinking about the needs of the football club. We don't want to be putting them in a position where they are going to be financially at a disadvantage and therefore they're going to lose their home. It would be crazy for us to do that. If we really care about the football club, we don't want them to have this decision, because we're clear that from our financial officer that there are risks, and everyone said that. And even if you look back at the webcast of the last meeting, the cabinet member himself said that it wasn't financially sound, the football club. So why are we doing this? It's the prize of the stadium. That's what it's about. But in gaining a stadium, we lose a piece of open space. And I think you have to weigh up, that loss of that open space. And I think it's really important. I just want us also to think about the other aspect of this decision, which is the retail park and how that will impact on our town. We have a town that is struggling. We have a Brighton Hill Centre that is struggling. And we need to think about the town centre in the future and what do we want for our town centre. And as a cabinet and as councillors, we should be thinking about that. And I think as part of that decision, we need to consider that. We have a piece of land, 29% stake in that. Do we want a retail park there that will impact on the rest of the town, just so that this financially stacks up to make this decision for the company that are taking this forward? I don't think that's the right decision. I also have grave concern. So I have concerns that we are actually going into negotiations to develop a retail park, and we're not looking at housing, when clearly the consultation that went out, the residents said clearly that their number one priority was housing in this borough. They didn't say their number one priority was a retail park. I'm sure if you asked as part of that consultation, where a retail park was within that consultation, I'm sure it wouldn't even come anywhere near. I would think it would be the bottom of what they want to do, what they want. And I think if we actually love our football ground, if we love football and want it to survive, we have a duty to say no to this decision. I am not confident of the consultation, as has been said tonight by Councillor Parker, and I think it is not a good piece of consultation, and I don't know any of the detail really of that consultation, and I really want to understand it, and I'm concerned that it's weighted in favour of the cabinet getting the decision they want. But I think it has been a useful exercise, this scrutiny, but also I would have liked, as group leader, but also as a councillor, this information prior to this scrutiny process. And I think it's very wrong that we didn't see it beforehand. And if we are going to make decisions in the future, and if we don't want to go through this process of calling in decisions, we need to have much more transparency, and you need to share this information with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Now that concludes the call-in signatories from this part of the process. We're now left with this committee to conclude its deliberations. But the first I must ask you to agree to suspend the standing orders to allow us to finalise this meeting. Is that okay?
But will we?
Eh?
But will we? Sorry, Chair. But will we? Because last meeting 2 weeks ago, we suspended standing orders to finish this meeting, and it didn't finish.
Well, I'm sorry, I left the crystal ball at home. I don't know. The intention is to finish the meeting. We've now done most of the stuff we came to do. The only thing left is for the members of the committee to decide what they want out of it. They've heard the evidence, they've had the questions, they've got the answers, they've got last week's information. All we now need to do is to decide what to do. If you want to take the next 2 hours to decide what to do, I can't control that. You can. So let's get on with it. Can we agree to suspend standing orders, please? Okay, they're suspended. We're now continuing. Does anybody who is a member of the committee want to make a contribution at this point? Councillor Miller.
I'll follow up what your suggestion was, Chair, about how we can move this ahead. And I'm not going to go through all the arguments. We've heard the arguments tonight. Maybe as a start, we've got a draft committee comments and concerns from the previous meeting. This single sheet the committee services very kindly put together. Yep. And could I suggest we use this as a bit of a template as to what the committee might like to think about recommending to Cabinet on the way forward on the various aspects that have been made and points that have been made here. I'll just make a personal comment. I went through all these documents when I was advised that I was going to join this committee, and the one word that jumped out of everything here was risk. With my own background, I looked at this as risk to the council, there's a risk to the football club, there's a risk to the developer, there's a risk right across the board. Things called risk registers are normally identified, and you work your way through a risk register and you identify the mitigations. Now, that I think is downstream, because I think what is being recommended here is a proposal. As you work through a risk register, you find out there's a brick wall somewhere, and you will not, and the risk is too high, and then you stop it. You stop the proposal, or you look around for a positive mitigation. So the concerns up to the production of this paper that we were given this evening, and I'm not going to go through everything here because they've been mentioned before in the discussions, the strategies, the policies, the green infrastructure strategies jumps up at me because, like Councillor Gavin James, I can remember that in 2 different committees. I've got no problem with that at all. I suggest that is the basis of what the Cabinet needs to examine. The Cabinet shows evidence of due diligence investigations carried out on the Council's behalf on each of the parties involved in any legal agreements. Blank statement. We can't go into the legal agreements, but due diligence is vital, that it has to be done. The assessments, that little paragraph C, I think it's becoming evident that that needs to be done. This is a fairly good site assessment. I've been involved in another site assessment outside local government, and this is as reasonable as I've seen. They start off with, I believe it was 16 sites, and work their way through them, set out a criteria, which I think has been followed, with the exception of one. And the one is the preference of the football club. And that zeroed in on a particular site. Now, again, here's a risk. If you go back to the football club under due diligence and say, if there was another preferred site, I'm pulling this out of thin air, maybe the leisure park. I'm trying to visualize where a football stadium could go around the leisure park. I'm having a problem with that. Maybe another review of the sites could well be part of that recommendation to Cabinet. Got no problem with D. That should go forward to the Cabinet, I think. A more thorough and exhaustive consultation, I think that's absolutely essential. E, I come back to the original point I made about risk. I've already made that point. And I don't know, that one about, presumably we don't have a financial assessment of the Basingstoke Town Football Club. I look around the table because... okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Then, in that case, that stands as well. The one G's been answered, I think. There was a paper produced about Medidown, kindly from Community Services, that set that scene about the local planning authority and the landowner issue. Chairman, without having to repeat them all, I think that's a starter for 10 that we could go forward, and as a recommendation, there might be some tweaking of those. Other members might be able to insert some. You may have your own view and take on it, but if we took that as a starter, maybe we could expedite this final part of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Next contribution, please. No contribution, that's okay, then we... Oh, damn it. Councillor Harvey.
You tried to move too soon. Can I first say, in relation to this note on Manydown, I don't know who wrote it. I don't know the context in which it's set, because only one paragraph of it is actually taken from the Manydown judgment. The rest of it is somebody's opinion of the Manydown judgment. And I don't recognise, in all, as councillors have already said on other occasions, the language that is used here. I've got no idea whether this was Eversheds, and if it was Eversheds, then I've got a question mark to put by that, but I don't know that one way or the other. I don't know if this is an internal document, but I do know that from reading the actual judgment itself, the judgment says something quite different about this authority fettering its role, and specifically says, and the judge says, it is to ensure that neither as landowner nor as local planning authority, and neither by anything it does, nor by anything it fails to do, will this council prejudice his own process. And in that point, he was referring specifically to the process of the core strategy. That was the decision that the judge was referring to. And I think those words are really important to bear in mind in the context of this. So I don't know who wrote this. I've got no authorship on it, but I bring it into question based upon everything I've lived through this authority on, the Manydown issue so far. I'm sure others would as well. So I'm going to put that to one side, because at the moment that is irrelevant, totally and utterly irrelevant. In terms of going forward, I hear what Councillor Miller has raised in terms of everything we agreed at the last meeting. To be positive, what I'd like to suggest is 3 elements to add to this meeting from what we've debated this evening, which I think are relevant to going forward. This has been, we should have had this from the start, we know that. You know, we've had that debate, but what it's done, I think, tonight has enabled us to go into far more structure to help the Cabinet, and that's what we're here for. So, I think we should add a little H, because I've got concerns over the legal agreements and the implications of the current arrangements detailed in the reports in the pink papers. So I want an independent review of the legal agreements, just as Councillor Cubitt has already suggested this evening, so we should capture that point. I'd like a little I, that we've identified tonight in the debate around the table, that there is concern over the promotion of the Camrose site for retail use. And this is the important point. Set against this council's existing retail study assessment on the implications that it details for our town centre of any other out-of-town centre retail parks. We already have a retail study assessment. It already tells us that any out-of-town centre retail parks are a risk to our town centre. Therefore, it should be relevant as a scrutiny committee. We refer Cabinet to that point. And again, I'm not going to suggest that we make the Manydown point a point, but Cabinet have got to get their head around this. The legal agreement said something, the judgment said something quite different, and that's why that point's important. And my little J is that there is concern over the Cabinet members' fiduciary responsibilities. And in saying this, I'm seeking to protect our Cabinet from themselves in that respect, really, in regard to this decision, considering the legal and financial concerns that have been aired in this committee this evening. It would be remiss of us as a scrutiny committee not to say to the Cabinet member, in all honesty, in terms of you fettering your position, we have concerns over your fiduciary responsibility in the context of the concerns that have been raised here. So just to sum it up, I've got process concerns, legal concerns and financial concerns, which are the remit of this body to highlight. That's what we're here for. We've got concerns over the positive future of the club. And I think that's worth noting. Not a single person around this table, nor any member of the public, nor the football club themselves has ever spoken ill of the football club. That's not what we're here for. But what we have raised is concerns about their future, and rightly so, we should ask, are they secure in what we're seeking as a positive step forward? And we hope they are. But obviously the report highlights issues around the business case, it highlights issues around the Section 151 officers' concerns that are rightly here. So we shouldn't miss that. And finally, and I think this is the missing piece of the puzzle here, and as ever, this is subjective, but it's relevant. How do we deal genuinely with that wealth, that absolute ocean of concern that came from the local community? All right, you can say, any community is going to come out about it, but at the moment, actually, we heard from resident after resident respected member of the community after respected member of the community from Riverdene about their genuine concerns of the impact of this current decision on their lives and their community. We must capture that and we must pay respect to that. And I don't think the decision does it justice at the moment. And I know what's all said, let's wait for the consultation. Well, yes, the consultation will give you a statistically verifiable figure that you might want to listen to or interpret in a particular way. The officers and the cabinet member will interpret that in the way they choose to. You cannot misinterpret what was said verbatim by the residents. That's on the public record, and we shouldn't ignore that in making the decision. So my final point really is, if you're going to do consultation, the meaningfulness of it, and I do this all the time, I do, the meaningfulness of consultation is not just a statistic saying 49% think this and 59% think that. A meaningful consultation is, substantively, what is the view being given to the benefit of the project and the decision that you're seeking to make. That part of the puzzle isn't there yet. And I think the concerns have been raised by others on that point. So, Chair, I think there's three little add-ons to the list there that we need to put. But the one question I've got to finish on, I still don't really know what's behind this decision. I still don't really know, despite everything we've gone through, what is actually behind this. And there's a nagging doubt there in the back of my mind that there is something else to all of this that is part of this decision. I haven't had that question answered. Maybe I will in the future as we go into this.
I don't think you asked it, actually. Yeah, but nonetheless, thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Okay, then.
I wasn't aware we were adding the list, I was just summarising my thoughts earlier. As a signatory, I will now add a comment as a member of this committee. I may come back as a ward member as well.
You may not.
Well, I might try. Obviously, one thing that's come up, the site that's been second most mentioned, I think, tonight, or possibly third, is the leisure park. Out of respect for the football club, they've clearly put a lot of work in, a lot more work than we have, over the last 5 years. It's important. We've seen enough information to say that this decision itself, obviously the cabinet's gift to review the decision, to review where they are, but they may choose, in light of all the information they've received, to perhaps review lots of elements of the decision. We also know that there's some planning applications, and we know that the planning application is a fraught process, certainly for the club, in terms of getting permission on any of the sites, particularly Old Common. It will maybe prudent to make sure that the cabinet don't make any decisions in terms of agreements reached with any procurement on the leisure park that would rule out the option of that as an alternative site. Obviously, I'd like to go a step further and say we should actively look at the opportunities so that if the Old Common is taken out at any stage of the process, even at the planning stage, that plan B is already there, so the club don't have to wait another. And you know yourself, Chair, from your own experience, this isn't from 2009, it goes back a long way before then when the club started looking for a new home. They can't afford to wait another, how long is it now? Is it 9 years, 10 years, something like that? Higher. 12 years, the club has been looking for a new home. You
said it's small for the people.
Yes, I know, it's got bigger. But I think waiting 12 years, I don't want to wait another 12 years, so I do think the Cabinet maybe, one, don't work the option of the leisure park, but actually could do a bit of work looking at the feasibility of the leisure park.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, primarily, I just want to seek your advice and others in regard to, I think, the matters that Councillor Cubitt raised originally. I mean, clearly it's difficult. We don't want to go into private session for the sake of it, but I think there are a number of matters within the legal agreement that cause concern. Now, her suggestion, which I think was accepted by the Cabinet member, was that the legal documents could be assessed by an external specialist lawyer or lawyers, because I think there are defects in it. But I think the caveat to that is that if that was to be the process, and the only alternative I think is for us to set it out in some way tonight so that it is actually recorded. But if that was to be accepted, that has to take place, it seems to me, before this decision is moved forward. And quite frankly, the Cabinet, I think, meets next on the 29th, not entirely certain about the date, but I don't think that that should be moved forward at that juncture until this review of the legal documentation has taken place, and I doubt really whether that would be possible in the time constraints that apply. So we would need a commitment from Councillor Isaac tonight that that moratorium could apply while that work is done. I mean, failing that, I think we've got to go through a process and set that out as best we can. But it would still have to be, in my view, supplemented by somebody a lot more able than I to be able to do it in the way that we're talking about. And I think we've expressed those reservations. The other thing I just want to check, I mean, in terms of the constitution under which we're working, I mean, it talks about a report being made by the Scrutiny Committee to Cabinet on these matters. I've never been clear, and I'm not clear tonight, just what form that might take, and who actually writes that, and what sort of content it has, because that's the reality of it. Something fairly comprehensive has got to go to Cabinet, and I don't think that's a 5-minute job. It obviously isn't. And what I'm not prepared for is, with respect to the chair of Scrutiny or any one of us, to go to Cabinet and just outline in some superficial ways the concerns of this committee. I think this has got to be a very detailed piece of work, a very important matter, and I think supplemented by the comments that we would get from this external legal advisor on the kernel of this, which is really these legal agreements. Now, that's going to take time, but so be it. So we need a commitment that nothing will happen at Cabinet on the 29th of July.
Can I just ensure that if we can dispose of the question with a legal review first, we could then talk about the process by which we report to Cabinet. Do you want to contribute about in relation to that particular question, Councillor Isaac?
Of course. As you know, I have said I've given an undertaking that we will look into the details of the documents and get them checked. But no, the Cabinet is perfectly possible for the Cabinet to make its decision. This is an advisory body to the Cabinet. We will make our decision, and we do not need to postpone making a decision based upon making sure that the legal documentation is all as it ship-shape. That can be done subsequently. Those are the details. What the Cabinet's there to do is to take the decision as a whole in the principle of the decision, not to get bogged down into the details of legal documents.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Can I just finish what I'm going to finish? My intention in relation to the conclusion of this meeting is that the conclusion of the meeting will be documented in a report produced by the committee services, which will be endorsed by the chair, me in this particular case, so that when it goes to Cabinet, it'll be a scrutiny committee report, not a scrutiny committee chairman's report. You understand? I'm distinguishing between me saying to the Cabinet, this is what they said, from what I think we should be doing is producing a report outlining the range of concerns and making sure that that gets to Cabinet. Okay? Now, Councillor Honorly Cubitt, you had an issue?
Well, no, that's perfect. I think if our report, you see, the key to this whole debate, and I think what Councillor Potter is absolutely correct about, and what we're all trying to establish, is that we identify on the front page and notify the Cabinet that collectively they need to be aware that we have identified 5 risks, so that it's not too wordy, that they understand prior to making that decision that we, as a collective cross-party group who have constitutional position to act as a critical friend, are notifying them of the significant and serious risks that they must be aware of prior to making that decision. We can't do any more than that. But not too wordy. So it needs to be bullet points, maybe 5 risks.
No,
and maybe we agree them tonight.
I only do short papers, I can assure you. Committee services do short papers because I ask them to, right? They do long papers when someone else asks them. Okay? But the point you're making is valid. We don't want another document. We don't want another bundle the same size as the legal bundle. We want advice from this committee expressed in a form which will be clear and concise and open and upfront to the cabinet and the cabinet members. Yeah, I totally agree. I said the cabinet and then I meant the cabinet member. Are we there? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Harvey.
Just to clarify then, the 3 bullet points that I highlighted and the bullet point that Councillor James highlighted in terms of the leisure park, you've got that. Cool.
So one last thing is that document produced on the Manydown decision, really not a criticism, but as a critical friend, is we need the author and we need the date. Because we can't have a document like that that's got no response ownership and no date.
For future reference, the point is noted.
Because if we predicated our debate in part on an unattributable, undated document, then that's...
In which case, will you get the document recirculated with the author and the date? Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the meeting now on the basis that we have unanimity, or making sure that we have a committee services report outlining and identifying in a concise way the concerns of the committee for consideration by the cabinet member.
Do you just want to go through and clarify just that we instead? You want to go on?
Not at this moment, because I want to talk about that. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, we're finished. I'm sorry, we have not decided as a committee to go into private, okay? If the lawyers want to talk to you separately, I'm sure they'd love to at 10 o'clock at night. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your contributions, and have a good and safe journey home. And I'll see you next week at the next scrutiny meeting.